yesterday, actually, and that's why I laughed when you said that. I mean, like, not like I mean, not like exactly almost, but I mean, it was just really funny. I was like driving DoorDash because I do that when I get stressed, I go out and make extra money because that helps me feel less stressed, right? Like I'm
whatever,
like, yeah,
whatever works. If the
whatever works.
motivation works,
So,
I'll take advantage of it.
so
Take note. We have to end on DoorDash. That's where we start.
well, so I went out to do that, and I was just like at a Mod Pizza to pick this order up, and I had pulled in like this, and the place I was gonna just park, the car didn't back out, like they were waiting, and I thought they were leaving. So I started backing my car up to get the parking spot that I had just passed, to park in there. And this kid that looks like he's like maybe 18 or something, and he's pushing his bike down like under the awning next to the buildings or whatever. And he's like, your car is supposed to go forward and not backwards. And I was like, your bike is supposed to be ridden and not pushed. And because I couldn't handle that. And then he stops, and he looks, and he lets go of his bike, and he throws his hands up in the air and I just looked at him like my window was down, and I was like, are you gonna come at me? Because I'm ready. Let's do this, brah. Come on. Let's go. Right. And he just like looked at me, and he's like, I can't even fight you because you're a girl. And I'm like, whatever you have to tell yourself to sleep at night, dude.
Well, I wouldn't tangle with you either.
I was just like, and then I'm like, what am I even doing? Like how how immature. And then I was like, so I was like, I can't believe I like almost just like picked a fight with some, I don't know. He didn't look like he could have been more than, 20, 22 at the most, 22, 23, something. A skinny little kid. I was like, I probably outweigh you, fucker. But and I told my friend, I was like, dude, I like almost just like picked a fight. And he's like, what happened? And I'm like, well, I guess sometimes I'm really immature. Your car's supposed to go forward. You're supposed to ride your bike. Like, Jesus, how 5th grade can I get? Oh yeah. So and then you're like, you're the voice of temperance, and I'm like, the timing of that comment. Yeah. So there we are. DoorDash.
Oh, I'm extremely pleased that you could make it today, as well as the rest of the panel. It's welcome, and I'm glad you're all here. And Tommy from the Bronx is there in the audience. I see. Hi, Tommy. You should get on the screen as well.
I thought he was going to come and kick all our asses.
He was going to come and kick all our asses, but apparently he's diving into a volcano at the moment. And somehow that's a superior thing to do than be on the Breakfast Club. Figure that.
I don't quite understand what you mean by diving into a volcano. It seems like a supremely bad idea, unless it's inactive, I suppose. But, I mean, is he sacrificing himself as a virgin? Is that what's happening? Or is he summoning up the dark gods of Cthulhu or something?
Well, instead of Joe versus the volcano, instead of Joe versus the volcano, it's Tommy versus the volcano.
Tommy versus the volcano.
So we know that the gods will be happy if it's a virgin, but what if it's a man slut?
Oh, man sakes. Oh, interesting. Oh. So Goth went away and welcome Sirius, I guess.
Hey, Joe, what do you know?
How's it going?
Were you expecting like a telephone booth for them to have the costume change?
No, actually, so I use StreamYard on my own channel, and the reason I was like, oh, is because I pay for it, so I have the fancy little amount that they charge you for, and but they just did an upgrade at least on the version that I have, where we can have a maximum of 10 people. So my thought right here was that, maybe if that's the case, then like there's no reason that this couldn't be run. That way we could all be here, because we can have like a maximum of 10 people or something now. So 10 or 15, I don't know. I don't remember what the number is, but
I can't see what's happening behind the scenes, or if we have more people to jump in.
Yeah, only Paul can see.
Yes,
There
the
could be
person.
somebody else waiting in the wings. I was hoping, since Joe's here, that Kate would be here as well, because I saw last week's episode that I wasn't here for.
Yep, me too.
I did not. What happened? I feel like I'm missing out.
Well, the only
It
thing
got
that
kind of
was missing was like a wrestling ring full of mud. Really.
So what? I'm curious. Well, feisty. You mean like serious and
it was heated.
serious and bionic dance where we're like duking it out? Oh. Well, what were you guys talking about when I popped in right before we went live?
Regis is dead, and Trump had a picture of him golfing with Brett Favre, tweeted out by Brett Favre.
Who,
And
I don't know who that is.
People are captioning it very funny ways.
Okay. But I mean,
making
Trump golfing is
references
no
to
new
Zero
thing. Like, what
when
is that,
before
Tuesday?
Rome was burning, you know?
Well, Brett Favre, for the such a dangerous step. Brett Favre basically is a football player.
Oh,
NFL.
okay.
Kind of well known. A lot. He's pretty much hated in a lot of circles from a lot of people. Yeah, he's not very well liked in a lot of places.
He also had a personal scandal where he tweeted or he sent people dick pics. And,
that's right. Yes, I forgot about that.
People are doing a callback joke to that right now, accusing him of doing one more dick pic.
Nice.
Yeah, you know, he should just go ahead and oblige them, but send a picture of Trump, right? Just like
Penisaurus Rex.
I can't believe you just said that. Oh man, Penisaurus Rex. That one's gonna be logged away in the back of my little brain nugget.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna have to use that against somebody at some point.
Oh yeah, I've been using that one for a long time.
My favorite so far is Brett Favre just got intercepted, and it was returned for 150,000 deaths.
Ooh, dang.
So
rough.
I just want to say while I'm back on the screen that you have to pay for it to get the 10. I thought they did do the upgrade for 10 for free, because I think I had an email to that effect a week or two ago. Because remember last week I said that was the case, but apparently it's not, because when I tried to add Joe, it wouldn't let me add unless I bumped someone. So like I said at the beginning before we actually came on live, more often than not I'll bump myself, but I will also bump other people. And so basically, the more you talk, the less likely you are to get bumped. So,
how much is it?
Yeah,
it's like $20 a month for the basic.
Yeah.
So
there's two of them.
It's not much, but they want you to front the whole year at the up front. I'm not cool with that.
Oh, geez.
Ooh, yeah.
I'm not cool with that. So I'll give it some thought, but at the moment I'm just like, yeah, not right this second. You know.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Maybe let's find out if what happens with the whole. You know, at the moment I'm staying locked in as much as possible on purpose, because I kind of take this whole thing seriously and I try to limit my exposure. Possible, but at the same time, there are things in life that we have to accomplish this year.
Right.
You know what I mean? And time waits for no man, right? So unfortunately, I'm going to have to break my own rules a little bit, because I really, really don't want to have to do long distance travel, as we're going to have to drive because it's not safe to fly right now. It's just simply not safe, you know?
Crazy.
The riskiest thing I've done this year is come here on a plane. I had to take 2 trains.
Yeah, how was that? Did you have to quarantine yourself?
Yeah, when I got here, I had to quarantine myself for 2 weeks. Yeah.
And so when you do that, do you have to do that in your house, or do they put you someplace?
No, they just ask you where you're staying, and they made no effort to check up on me to see if I stayed here. So I could have totally broken the rules, and there would have been no consequence or no way for them to know that. But I still take it seriously.
Yeah.
These rules actually make sense, and therefore I'm going to follow them, because they're in my interest and in the interest of the wider community, and blah blah blah. And if I'm going to preach to people to stay home as much as possible, it's incumbent upon me to do so. So.
I just
consistent or something, Paul.
Bye, agent.
checked their pricing, and it's if you pay the yearly version, it's 20. It's equivalent of 20 a month. If you pay actually monthly, which they do have an option, it's 25 a month.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay.
So you get a discount if you pay in advance, basically, which is pretty standard.
Yeah, which I understand, from a business point of view, but
also it's a chunk.
I'm going to mull it over because basically, if I can actually get more than 6 people every week, I'll definitely pay for it. How's that for a fucking?
Well, I mean, the way I look at it, if you want to do it, I mean, I'll kick in a third.
Well, that's cool. I appreciate that, Joe. We'll get in touch privately about that on Facebook if it looks like that's the way to go. That's really cool. I appreciate that. But yeah, anyway.
I could probably also do that as well. I mean, at this exact moment, all of the money has to do with the buying of the property, but in like another month, that will probably be a different story. So as that settles down, hopefully, and I have a new home.
Well, good luck for you as well with that. I know how frustrating and complicated it can be, not just finding a new home, but when you actually find one, moving is another logistical and emotional nightmare, which I don't envy for anybody. I mean, Kazum, you're well acquainted with that. You've moved around so much since I've been acquainted with you.
Yeah.
Must be pretty stressful.
It can be. But then again, I don't have that much stuff anymore, so it's easier than it is for some, so.
Well, I hear that. I came to America with a couple of suitcases. You know what I mean? So
that's the easiest way. If you decide you want to organize your stuff and divest, move, because you'll certainly find you don't need certain things that you've held on to for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I ever told you this, but I used to be a hoarder. When I first started my YouTube channel, I had quite a hoard in that apartment with my son, and I was always very careful about hiding my camera angle so you couldn't see all my crap behind me. But I had well over 100 paintings that I did myself.
Oh wow!
I just didn't have any place to put. My shop was full of paintings. The storage room in my shop was full of paintings. My flat was full of paintings. Plus, I used to collect a lot of junk that just, for whatever reason, I just thought it was quirky to collect, and I wanted to have a lot of quirky collections to be a quirky character. And so I just started random collections for no apparent reason. Like I decided one day, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to collect buttons. And I had 2 massive jars of buttons of all shapes and sizes and colors for no reason other than I thought it would be cool to collect buttons. And I'm looking at these buttons along with the rest of my hoard, and I'm going, well, you got to throw some of this shit away, and it has no value, not even to me, really. Other than the quest of finding the buttons. I did that already, so it was okay to chuck them. But
that is fascinating, actually.
Well, it's when if you're a hoarder and you have to get rid of your hoard, you have to develop a psychology that makes you not hoard it anymore, because you'll just keep doing it.
It's fascinating to hear you admit, one, that you used to be a hoarder, because if you could see my place, right, you'd be like, just, oh my God, there's like so much stuff, and moving is in fact a nightmare for me. But it's interesting because I do in fact have a lot of stuff, but I don't consider myself a hoarder because I don't feel like I collect random things. And anybody who knows me, if they come into my house, they actually always tell me they find it quite interesting, because even though there is just tons of books everywhere, books are my thing. That is true. I am a bibliophile, for real. Books are definitely a thing. But not a hoarder because I don't collect random stuff. Everything that I have, I do have a couple things that I collect, but everything that I have is usually in some way, shape, or form a literal reflection of some part of my life. So people are like, where you live, yes, you have a lot of things, but it's like a memory castle. Like if I was to pick something up and ask you, where did you get this, or what is this thing, there would be a story that goes along with it. You didn't just go to Value Village and decide to buy I don't know, all the Rainbow Bright dolls or something, because dolls. And by the way, I don't have all the Rainbow Bright dolls. That was a complete example. But that's
Yeah,
kind
I
of
used to have one, and I love those things. I love green
Well,
mold, right?
that's the thing too, and there is a difference. I mean, I consider myself a pack rat, which is different than a hoarder. It's a lower,
I would say I would go with that. I am a pack rat for
and
sure.
I'm the same way as Amy. Like everything that I have had, even if it doesn't mean anything to me now, it had some meaning to me at the time.
Right.
And part of it for me was I was raised by my grandparents. So my grandmother was a child of the Depression, and my grandfather, who was actually a step grandfather, he had a family during the Depression because there was a big age gap between him and my grandmother. So they were like, you didn't waste anything, and you didn't throw away anything that was still
That was my grandmother too.
So
Yeah.
it could be fixed, even if you couldn't fix it. As long as there was somebody who could fix it, you didn't throw it away because you're gonna at least get it to someone who can fix it, and they can fix it. So stuff piled up. But like I would definitely not classify as a hoarder. Even my grandmother didn't. Although like when she died, like I found receipts from shit from like 1967. I'm not even exaggerating. She had papers going back forever, all these different things that she thought she would need. But my aunt Evelyn, when she died, she was a legitimate hoarder. Like when we went to clean the place up, I figured, look, I'm just going to donate everything to charity, and you could barely move through the whole place. And pack rats, their places will be messy, maybe disorganized, but they're usually not dirty. Hoarders tend to have dirty houses. And so my aunt's house was filthy and everything was in bad shape. So after a while, after bagging up and going through, and we started throwing out this because there's a lot of soiled clothes that just weren't properly washed. And I reached a point where I was like, and we had taken some stuff to give it to my mom, and we took a few, took a microwave and a few other things. And at a certain point, I was just staring at this pile of worthless garbage, and I just said, fuck it. And I just called the complex where she lived, and I just said, they knew me because I grew up there. I just said, look, I'm done with this shit. I'm just fucking not done. I'm just not doing it anymore. I can't hack this. And I just gave him the keys back and just walked away from it because it was really getting to me. It was like I'm used to living in and Rob's been in my house. I'm used to a disorganized house. My house isn't dirty, and you can move. And it was just so disgusting, and I just couldn't take it.
Yeah,
I understand that, Joe, because like my grandmother she was kind of like pack rat hoarder. She was kind of like the combination, if you will. And that's exactly what happened when she got really sick. She actually developed, and we didn't know it at the time, but she ended up developing Alzheimer's, like the early stages of Alzheimer's. Oh. So we had to be really careful when we had to get her out of the house. And then once it was time to clean everything, there was a lot of things. Same situation with your aunt. A lot of things that were kept and a lot of things, pitch, throw away. I mean, she kept a lot. I mean, there was like piles. You had the pathway to walk through. I mean, oh my God.
That is not my house. I've been in houses like that, though.
Hoarders don't take care of things. They accumulate things.
Yes, that's a great way to describe it.
And so what happened is, and so what made me feel so bad, because I remember my aunt was always crying poverty. And look, she was on a fixed income. She was disabled. But if she had way more clothes than I've ever owned in my life, and if she had spent twice as much money on half as many things, she actually would have had some nice things.
I think that is a super interesting psychology, both for the people that are engaged in it and for the people that perceive it from the outside, because the whole there's this idea that poor people or people that, are just like lower income wouldn't be that if they would just not spend their money frivolously, right? But there's the other side of that is that if you do not have a lot of money, then you're looking at either a huge long road of literally penny pinching for us an incredibly long time versus kind of dealing with the weight of your everyday life by treating yourself to something that maybe you don't need, but it helps you in a psychological capacity, right? And of course,
Yeah, sometimes all you can do is spend your money frivolously.
right, because the path to not doing that is incredibly difficult. It is not easy, no matter where you are on that, and yeah, and you're right. And so it's just, and I find it interesting that people are so harsh about that. I mean, I get I guess because, like, in part I feel like I'm the person who manages our money in the house, and I am a whip cracker about it. Like, even if I'm not the one that goes and does the grocery shopping or whatever, I'm like, this is what is on the list. Do not deviate from this list. Do not go, do not see a sale, do not do the whatever. You buy these things, right? And it's just like, and I'm super particular about all of that, like super, super penny pinching, because I wanted to be able to do the thing that I'm doing right now, which is not live in an apartment and buy property and do the things. But I've been doing this for years. This wasn't, I decided last year I was going to do this. I have been, like, paying attention to, like, all of the things, my credit cards and how much cash back and where am I spending and how often am I paying and what am I paying and interest rates and all of these things, like paying hardcore attention to it. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I was just me trying to live my life, right? Like, if it was just me and I had to get up and go to work and do my thing or whatever and do all the stuff around the house, if I didn't have anybody to be a part of that family unit with me, there's no way I'd be able to do that. I'd still be doing I just have to interrupt myself. Like, explain to me, Boobs McGee, explain to me this moniker that you have on the screen. Like, I'm just staring at your name and I'm like, I just don't understand. Like, I can't stop thinking about it, like noodling about it in the back of my head. So please, where did this come from? I mean, but everybody's got boobs. I'm like, yep, there they are.
Not everybody's got those.
Well, no, only you have them right now, quite literally. Okay, there, question answered. Anyway, I'm sorry. You guys have to stop me because I will just, like, get on a roll, man. Like,
Well, the thing, and I hear what you're saying too. I mean, there's definitely, when people are very harsh, like, you'll see somebody. I remember there was a thing on Fox News a few years back where they were like, 85% of poor households have a refrigerator, as if that was like, well, they're obviously frivolous if they have a place to put their food that won't spoil. I mean, it was crazy. Or like if someone has a cell phone and they freak out, it's like, well, I consider it, at this point, I consider a smartphone like a necessary utility if you're going to survive in the world we live in.
yeah, no kidding.
I want to say something about that, actually. Last Christmas, I decided I just took 50 quid out of the bank and went around my hometown in the suburbs of London and went and gave a bunch of money out to homeless people. And I gave it out in increments of 5s or 10s, which, is relatively generous. They don't normally expect more than £1, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, but it's Christmas, right? And the first person I gave a 10 or two, she looked up and said, thank you. And then I noticed she had a brand new iPhone, right? And I'm like, oh, I don't know what to think about that, because on the one hand, it's not surprising. Everybody's got a phone, as you say, and it is kind of like a life necessity and whatever. But, do you have a contract? I mean, I don't even have I didn't at that time have an iPhone. And so, but on the other hand, that was in December. Now, millions of people are being evicted. There's going to be lots of people that are homeless with iPhones, lots of people who are homeless, who had really good jobs, and so we have to start, I think, right this minute, adopting a different attitude about homelessness and what we're going to do about it. Because there's about to be a lot of fucking homeless people.
Yeah.
Well, so this is an interesting thing too, and I just feel like it's very short-sighted to be quite as judgmental as we see people. So a couple of anecdotal but relative things. So the place I live now, the apartment, a couple, like the next building over, because our buildings are close, so we kind of know one another. But we had a neighbor that lived over there for about a year, and she was a meth addict, but she always had a cell phone, even though she didn't really have any money. because you can get a cell phone for relatively cheap. And then you can do something like get Cricket, where you just pay ahead and that's it. So you pay your, when you come into your $25 or $50, you put it on your cell phone and then you have it for however long it takes you to run that out. And then you still have your phone, but you don't. So I feel like there are ways that actually can happen that are that people who are low income or, like her, where their finances are just all over the place all the time. Or other people can buy you those cell phones, give you the phone, and then they can say, put $50 on your tab every month. And that's a thing that can happen. And then also years ago, this is like in my mid-20s, I was working in downtown Seattle, and there was a guy, his name was Otis. He was on the corner of the building that I worked in. And so we would come down for coffee breaks, because there was also a Starbucks on the corner. Shock, I know. But we would come down for a coffee break and just walk to the corner to this Starbucks. And Otis was always there panhandling with his box. And at first, I never talked to him. I worked there for 2.5 years, something though. And one day, one of the tech guys was like, actually, that guy's pretty cool. You should just like say hi to him sometime. And so I did. And then after that, he was like super cool. And so every time we would come down, we'd stand out there and we'd like have a smoke, and we'd give him a smoke, and we just kind of shoot the shit with him. And he was there like clockwork every single day. And then he was gone in the evening. Well, I learned over that course of time that Otis actually had a place that he lived, but he was disabled. Like he had some kind, he was an older guy. So, easy in his 50s, if not older than that. But he was lame in one leg. He couldn't use it very well. So he was not able to get any kind of actual job. But he lived with a lady friend of some manner. I have no idea if it was a relation of his, like, or just a partner of some sort, but he lived in an apartment with someone, and every day he bussed into town. That was his corner where he panhandled, and that was what he did for the entire time that I worked there. He had been a former alcoholic, I learned during that time. But it's possible to have the places to live, yet still be in such an impoverished state of living that the only thing you can do is be on that street corner. And it's so easy in at least American society. If you get one felony, and the things that are felonies in this society are so easy to, it's very easy to get a felony in America. And if you get one felony, that is like destroys the kinds of jobs that you may have been qualified for, right? And suddenly you're in and it just is a very, really, it's so easy to go down and very hard to climb out, Well,
that's why people who are middle class, who have always been middle class, I find are very myopic and very judgmental and very, and they have a kind of a TV view of a lot of things. They have a TV view of evil, and they have a TV view of what it means to be poor. And I've even heard people say shit like, oh, well, they didn't believe somebody was really that poor because they had clean clothes on. I'm like, so if their clothes were clean, never thinking, okay, maybe they got enough money up to, go use a laundromat and wash their clothes. And everything I've ever seen of people who are homeless is that one of the big things for them is if those who can, if they can find a place to bathe themselves, they do. But so they kind of expect this person to be dirty and stinky. But if that person was dirty and stinky, then they would look down upon them and say bad shit about them. So they can't win, And there's been a couple times, I've never been homeless, but there's been times in my life where I was really, really struggling financially, like my family and then myself. And I'm glad. Not at the time, it sucked. It was horrible. But the thing is that I'm glad now that I'm doing better, that I have an appreciation for what it's like to be on the bottom, because I could very easily be some stuck-up asshole. I tend to be contemptuous of people anyway, so I could easily see myself being some arrogant asshole looking down upon people and saying, oh, well, but because I at one point I was working but I was getting paid so poorly and they cut our hours that all I could afford, because I had built up debt from when I was making more money, that I was living on Slim Fast and burritos. And I'm not even fucking exaggerating, because I could get a can of Slim Fast was 89 cents and a burrito was 89 cents. So I could live on $3 a day, because I didn't really because I'm between trying to find work and everything, and I didn't have a lot of time to cook the way I normally would. So and they were portable, so I could bring them to work with me and do, and that's what I lived on for like over a month, almost a month and a half. And that sucked. That was horrible, because and every other dollar I had went to trying to catch up on my debts. My car almost got repossessed. So I've been on the ragged edge, and then even digging out took years. So I have a better appreciation. So I get so, and again, I expect rich assholes who have always been rich to have that attitude, because what they don't know, they've never had to struggle for anything.
Right.
When I see middle class people, it incenses me, because I'm like, most people are just a couple paychecks away from being down there with everybody else,
and they don't even know. Yep, it's so true.
On the cell phones thing, being somebody who leads people from absolute rock bottom all the way up, I get people to get their Medicaid card because it's the easiest way to get an Obama phone, is as far as verification. And then I lead them to go take that Obama phone, take the SIM card out.
You okay?
Any of the cell phones that are underneath the glass at a pawn shop, that it'll work in.
Yeah.
So then you have a smartphone with 200 hours.
Nice.
Sorry, 200 minutes per month, right? You take that smartphone, you turn it on to Wi-Fi mode to make Wi-Fi calls, and then you use that to create a map of all of the free Wi-Fi. There are websites that do this for you, right? So you have people using, instead of regular phone calls, they'll do like Facebook calls, so that they don't waste their 200 minutes, and only use the 200 minutes for, absolute work related things, like trying to get a job interview.
And that is, oh man, it's awesome actually to hear that you even know how to do that. And like, I feel like you're just like told us this awesome DIY life hack, and I love that kind of stuff, because I'm always looking for the way, The
iPhone is just the outer shell. The SIM card inside could be that of an Obama phone. It could be somebody that I taught to buy a $30 cell phone from underneath the glass of a pawn shop that just happens to work with that SIM card. That gives them the ability to surf the net on all the free Wi-Fi around town.
But it's so frustrating, though. It's frustrating to hear it at the same time that it's awesome to hear it. And the reason it's frustrating is because it is aggravating to me that even though that exists, how hard is that? I mean, I didn't know that. How many people know, that it can be done, and then B, how to do it after they know that it can be done? Like,
not many people would.
People shouldn't have to know crazy things like that in order to just function.
Here's the thing you find, though, is that people that are in those situations, they share information. So once they figure it out, somebody figures it out. So it's kind of like you have the skill, whatever income level you're at, you got the skills to function at that level. And so does everybody else at the same level, or most of them anyway. And so what ends up happening is, if you're in, I call it scrounging subsistence level, where basically, you're just looking for everything. There's some sharp people that know a lot of ways. It's because I think about it now, like now that I'm doing better, like I compare now to the days that we were like literally stripping it. Like I used to have a spreadsheet, and I would put out all, here's the days I'm getting paid, and here's when the bills are due, and figuring out what bill was going to get paid and who was going to be late this month, and when that was going to get paid, and how late it was going to be. And so I had this whole system. I even figured out when I was living in Buffalo, and then when I moved to Allentown, same thing. I had
like Billy Joel's Allentown, Pennsylvania,
yes.
That's kind of cool.
So I had in Buffalo, I had 2 different bank accounts. So what I used to do is I used to double float checks.
What does that mean?
So basically, when you float a check, you're writing a check for something you don't have the money for, with the idea that by the time the check hits the bank, you'll have money.
Okay, so you would
Ah.
write a check, but then you would write a check on the check?
Yes, into the other bank account. So bank one, I'd write a check from
Oh.
bank two, and then bank two, I would wait a day, and then I would write a check to bank two from bank one, and then that would give me a few. So that would give me. I figured out that would give me 3 days. In 3 days, I had to have the actual money to cover the checks, otherwise they would all bounce.
And then, of course, that's its own freaking rabbit hole of terror.
When I moved out, similarly, I found that the local grocery store would cash checks up to $30, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
So if I would run short, I could go and I would go to three. There was 3 of the same same grocery store near me. So I would go to each one of them and write a check for $30, knowing that check wasn't going to hit until like. If I did it on a Friday, it wouldn't hit till Tuesday of the following week, and I got paid on Tuesday. So I knew that if I flopped it around, I could cover the checks.
Oh man!
Wow, that's what you call calculations.
I was a financial juggler to the shit I had to do to get through. But I never would have developed that skill if I was always doing fine.
I find it interesting though too, and when you say like people develop the skills that they need to subsist at the level that they're at, whatever that may be, and I actually find that a fascinating statement because regardless of where I'm at, right, I look everywhere, which I have found is somewhat, it seems to be unlike the people that are generally around me, is that I will look for a way to do a thing. And then I'm not satisfied with that one way. Like somebody will be like, here is how you do the thing. And then I'm like, okay, that is only my beginning point. And then I start asking, I ask all my friends, whoever there is out there, I'm like, how do you guys do the thing? Because every time, without fail, somebody knows something more, has a tiny bit of information more.
Yeah,
like
I know you're going with this.
And it's like, I don't care what, it's like, I long ago got rid of caring about, I don't care if you think I am the absolute dumbest person in the world. Your opinion in that way of me does not matter. What matters to me is that I can find the path to achieve the thing that I want to. And you know what? If I have to look stupid to somebody else, but then get to my goal in the end, who's going to have the last laugh, right? But so I will sometimes go places and ask with like the most ignorant tone of voice that I can possibly muster, like, oh my gosh, like, how does the screwdriver work, right? Because I know that somebody will come along and they'll be like, oh, I'll show you how a screwdriver works. That's fine, because I swear to God, even though I don't always learn something, the chances that somebody will still say something that I can tuck away as a nugget that I'm like, that isn't useful to this situation, but that is useful regarding this thing over here is inevitable. So I do that a lot. I could just collect it. I don't care. I don't care where people come from. I don't care where the information comes from or whatever, because that's how you figure it out. I mean, when I first started this whole process of like the whole house thingy, right? I had gone to BECU and I was like, we want to do this thing and, buy a house at a property and blah, blah, blah. And the dude, does some stuff and whatever. And he's like, we will never give you money because X, Y, or Z. And I was like, oh, okay. So we have some really big hurdles to overcome. But being me, I waited a little bit and then I went back and I talked to a different person. And that different person was like, that's not exactly true what that other person told you. And I was like, oh, whoa. And so then I was like, well, if person number 2 says that about person number 1, maybe I should go back and talk to a third person. I did this 4 times and I got 4 different answers every single time. Like, the lesson learned, never settle for just one answer. Just go be redundant. Like, go be redundant.
You know what that sounds like? It sounds like when you're calling, like you're doing the customer service thing, like if something's broken, like your phone, and every time you call, you get a different person, you get the different answers too.
Yes, it is just
That's
like
exactly what it sounds like.
And I do that too. Like I will, like if we have a tech or something come out for the internet or whatever, I ask them a whole bunch of questions because now I know that he's going to tell me something. And then when I get on the phone with customer service and they tell me something, I'm like, well, that's funny because the tech that was just out here, right? You know, and then that person will say some stuff. And then by the time I get to the third person, I'm like, well, actually, this is what your guys' process is. Because I've been through it like 20 times now, you know, and then they're like, oh, you know, like
she's onto us.
It's like, oh shit, she knows because the way they talk to you sometimes, like they think that you don't know anything.
Yes.
And it's usually that tone of voice, and it's like, oh, just wait. And so every time they say, well, are you sure you did this? I'm like, I would sometimes talk about like, yeah, I'm sure with it, especially if they throw the attitude. Now, if they're the nice customer service people, that's okay. I don't mind it. That's cool. But when they're the rude ones, that's where you can have fun.
When they do that, I go nuts, especially because I'll call tech support. But obviously, I'm a technical guy. You know, I'm not unsophisticated with technology. And sometimes I'll get on these things, and the guys like they always want to do like a go to meeting or something like that, or they want to be able to see my screen because they can't believe that what I'm telling them. I'm like, dude, I know where I'm at. I know what you're asking me to do. I'm in the right place. And then a lot of times I'll just have to escalate to a higher level because I'm getting so fed up. Real quick though, Rochester Swift was basically saying that, hey, we're not talking about why people are in that situation. Well, and that's a good point. I mean, that people won't stop to think that people who work at Walmart actually qualify for food stamps and how fucked up that is. Like if you're working a full-time job, you shouldn't be paid so poorly that you need assistance.
And that goes into the current conversation in Congress right now. They're saying that you shouldn't make more money on unemployment than you make in the job. And they want to use that as an argument to give you less money for unemployment instead of an argument to give you more money for working.
Yeah.
Which is outrageous.
Well, what's particularly egregious about that, Paul, because you're totally right, is that if you look at the Republicans, the way that they do tax policy, they want the capital gains tax to always be really low. So for anyone who doesn't know, the capital gains tax is the tax you pay on the interest you make on your investments. So right now, as it stands, with the exception of people who are on the very bottom of the income ladder, the capital gains rate is a lower marginal rate than what you generally would pay if you're working. So unless you're indigent, because people that are indigent poor are basically paying like 10% or less. But everybody else, it goes 15, then to 20, then 20, like 26, and then 30. So most of us, at least part of our money, is being taxed at a greater rate than the capital gains rate, which means that you're getting taxed as a person who works. You're paying a higher tax than someone who made their money by not working and just investing it. And that's, to me, warped. I think you should get whatever your tax rate should be, whatever it is. Everyone should be paying the same rate for the same money, not well, I didn't work for it, so I get to keep more of it.
You mean a flat tax rate? Because
no, not a flat tax rate.
Okay.
Still progressive. But
Okay.
that's the thing. Because the capital gains rate is a flat rate. It's 15%. So right now, like the top marginal rate is 33%. So last year wasn't a great year, but generally speaking, the bulk of my money that I get taxed on is at 33%. So my investments get taxed less than the money I earned working. That makes no sense.
Yeah, put it another way, if you're say an orthodontist and you make $500,000 a year, you'll pay more taxes than someone whose money is only coming from their investments.
Right.
Because they're paying a lower rate. Even if they make the same $800,000 a year in investments, they pay lower taxes on it, or $500,000 a year, whatever.
Because of how the money is coming to them.
Because of what category of tax you're talking about.
Right. So basically means
it's based on how the money's coming to them. Yeah.
Exactly. So basically, if you're extremely wealthy and living off the proceeds, which you may not have earned yourself, you may have inherited that from somebody else, you're paying less than someone who's actually going out to work and doing a job. And that's perverse.
And Jeff Bezos just made a whole shit ton of money. I got no problem with success. I like success. I got no problem with people making money. I like making money.
Hell yeah.
But the amount of money that he made based on what he himself does, that's kind of criminal. I mean,
It's obscene.
Yeah.
It's outrageous. Outrageous.
I don't know how true it was, but the day before yesterday, I saw a headline that said Jeff Bezos made $11 billion yesterday. And I'm thinking, even if that's an exaggeration by 10 times, and it's only 1.1 billion a day, are we really comfortable with that? I mean, this is wealth beyond pharaohs, right? Beyond any of the royalty that we shrugged off our ancestors, I should say, shrugged off hundreds of years ago. You know?
So, do you think that because I too am, I too feel that I am a capitalist person, right? I do not believe in an unregulated capitalist market by any stretch of the imagination. That is a terrible idea, and it's borne itself out to be a terrible idea in the past. Like, we know this, but I do agree. Like, I like success, I like money, I like the things, right? But do you think that when we make comments like this is obscene, right? Is that actually because the amount of money he is making is obscene, or is it made obscene because it is compared to the rest of society and other things that are going on, like our lowest levels of poverty, our healthcare system? Like, if those things were different, right? If people were not, struggling with a cell phone and having to, double float checks, right? Would we still consider his success obscene?
Both. It's
Well,
both.
jump in there as well. And sorry, go ahead, Michael.
If he were to take 1% of his earnings and redistribute them as profit sharing to all of his employees, I would have a completely different outlook, just like you're saying.
Right.
It would raise his employees to the level where I wouldn't give a shit about how much money he's making.
Well, and that's really what it is. Is because and that's why because I know what's his name, the guy who kept blaming capitalism. There's nothing inherent. Capitalism is neutral. It's all how you use it. It's a system. And the thing is that the social democracies in Europe also have capitalist economies. The difference is that when we have this laissez-faire capitalism that is poorly regulated, that where the tax structure is way out of whack, that's exactly what you end up having. What you're talking about is where that person at the top is what they're getting paid is so out of proportion to their contribution to the earnings of the wealth. So because there's always going to be a certain amount of your labor you give up. When it's part of the whole deal is that the person who is running the company, assuming that's their company and not like a publicly traded and they're just a CEO, but whoever owns the company, they're taking a certain level of risk and they're taking a certain level of responsibility on, and then the worker gives up a portion of the value of their labor to have less responsibility and less risk. So and that's perfectly fine, and that can be equitable. The difference is that the imbalance over the last 50 years has shifted so much that it's now out of whack. So like Michael said, if you tax probably take more than 1%, but if you take a few percent of what Jeff Bezos' income is, and he was giving it to his workers, then that would be the case. His workers wouldn't need to to go on public assistance. They could fend for themselves, and so that's why it's obscene, because it's not equitable, and it's not just, and the split is not justifiable. Unfortunately, over the last 50 years, we've been inculcated with the idea that if we get paid at all by the people we work for, it's a gift, like they're doing us a favor, as opposed to giving us the value of what we've done.
Yeah, I hear that. One of the things the reason I personally call it obscene, Sister Danger, is because it betrays that the system is stacked against normal people and in favor of the oligarchy, and it's only going to get worse instead of better, because they are the ones who are controlling the politicians, and the only solution is the people's movement, as far as I'm concerned. And I almost think that no matter who wins the election in November, there needs to be a general strike, because I think workers need to assert themselves in the United States in a way that hasn't been done for 60 or 70 or 80 years.
Yeah.
I so agree. I want these protests to continue. I'm serious. Like, I know, like, if you're not, if you are not here in Portland or Seattle, I think it's probably quite a different. I mean, I literally just talked to my mom about this for like an hour this afternoon, because she called me up and she was just like, "What is happening over there? Is it just like burning down?" And I'm like, "No, Mom, it's not burning down. It's like 3 to 4 city blocks in both cities that are really the activity areas, and they are not on fire every single night like the news is showing you. That isn't a thing, you know." But I was like, you know, and we talk about it a lot here in our house as well, you know, but you know, I was like, if you want the most honest to God, truest news that you're going to see on this, watch the live streams, watch the people that are showing what is happening, that literally are overlooking their apartment or whatever is above the square. They've got it on camera. Watch the people who are just there on the ground with their body cams, with their cell phones. Watch it, because that is going to be the most, like, that raw unedited footage is going to be the absolute most true thing that you're going to see in all of this. And then you will see what is really happening, that it is like the news is just making it crazy. And
well, that's what the news does. The news always enhances it, because they're looking for the ratings. They're looking for people because they play on the fear. It's not on the good news. It's not on the good stuff that's happening. It's all this other crap.
There's also the footage that you do find when you look online. You look on YouTube. There's a lot of footage you find there and on Twitter too. So
yes, and you know, and I just want to say, like, you know, and I told my mom, I said, look, I feel like it's really important to say, you know, yes, there are bad actors on both sides of this. Okay, there are definitely people who are instigators in the protester side. We know this for a fact. We know that Proud Boys have come out. You know, we know that there are black bloc people that get out there and start crap, right? Or whatever. But so I'm not going to pretend like one side is wholly innocent and the other side is wholly guilty. But there are some very important distinguishers here. One of these is that one side is a group of people who are supposed to be held to a higher standard as those that we have ceded our personal, like as citizens. It's a social contract. People who are the cops, they are the feds, they are the whatevers they are. They take oaths of office, and we as a community, as a society, hold them to a higher standard of behavior and integrity and honesty. And you don't hold that of the average citizen who's out there protesting. And then let's not go into the fact that also, you're like, let me say something. Go ahead.
Okay, on that point, two things. First of all, the police benefit from a thing called qualified immunity.
Yes, they do.
And Trump, so that's the first thing. And Trump, earlier in the week, was interviewed by Chris Wallace. It was a pretty well circulated interview, and he said a lot of things in that interview which were newsworthy and both problematic. But one of the things he said in that interview was that the police need more immunity. This is a guy who has 25 million people around the country protesting against police brutality. And in that environment, he sends these cops into Portland. And like I said in the video on my own channel today, and I really want to bring the group into this discussion, I'm going to ask the question, and I'm going to jump back off and let Joe back on. But I want everybody to discuss this question, and I'll kick someone off and come in with my own opinion afterwards. But what's the end game here? What conditions have to exist in a city for Trump to decide it's time to pull the troops out? Because if there's no plan to get out, they're not coming out.
Right.
Discuss.
What conditions need to be there that the rioters would stop rioting?
So I think actually both of those are really good questions. I actually think I have not really thought about Goth's question from that perspective. I've definitely thought about your question, Kazoom. What conditions need to be met for rioters? Part of the reason I said that I want to see it continue, and I will confess just straight out of the gate that I do not have an answer to what you are saying. Even in my own consideration here. But one of the reasons that I want to see it continue is because one thing that I do know that is happening because of this is that it is becoming more and more unquestionable. It cannot be denied anymore that things like police brutality are real and they exist. That the systemic racism is absolutely there and it is real and it exists. And because these riots are continuing, we are seeing now in a condensed version. In the past, I would say, maybe even the past. Obviously, this has been like a long thing, but even the past 10 years or so, what we experience in the media is, George Floyd gets shot and he's one dude and pretty soon he drops out, and Breonna Taylor gets killed in her house. And it's this, they're always one-offs. They're always isolated incidences, is how it is easy to justify that behavior because they happen bit by bit by bit by bit. And when people like BLM, pipe up and say things like this is a problem. These things are happening because of something greater and systemic. People are like, nah, you're just making a big issue out of this one-off incident. And now this is proving, these are showing that isn't the case, that they are right, that this police brutality, I mean, when we start looking at like how many of these cops have records of their own problems, and it's shining a light.
Yeah, well, as far as rioting, first off, most of what's going on isn't rioting. Secondly,
yeah, that's also true.
That's a very important thing. Secondly, what rioting? If you look at what's happening now, how we see on a daily basis the use of excessive force by police against people who are not rioters.
Yes, we do.
Yes, that's true.
100%.
The mom group that all linked arms. And they're getting sprayed. They're literally standing there holding on, locking arms. They're not throwing anything. They're not attacking anybody. They're not even cursing. They're not even raising their voice. They're yelling, but that's it. And they're getting sprayed down. And so that's what what I've been saying for some time now is that when the police show up dressed for war, they bring war with them. So and right now, I'll tell you what the end game is for Trump. I already know what the end game is. The end game for Trump is his reelection, because this is what this is all about. Is him trying to go out there and show how big his balls are, so that his base will come out and bring him to victory. And he wants
I still feel like I need a microscope.
And he wants to scare the middle America into thinking that it's chaos and you need the tough guy, you need the strong man to put down the insurrection, because they're building this as a revolution, which is not.
It's a completely invented insurrection, because like you said, when the police show up dressed for war, they bring war with them. These protests all started off peacefully. It was when the cops showed up that it got violent.
Yes.
Because you can roll your fucking eyes all you want. It doesn't change reality. It is the truth.
It doesn't. What you're saying doesn't change reality either.
But what I'm saying is reality.
What part do you disagree with, Kazoom?
I mean, there's this notion that the only reason that police are the ones that always start the violence, that there's nothing. I mean, it's
police violence is the entire cause of all of this. All of this was kicked off because of police violence, Kazoom. It was police violence, not just George Floyd, not just Breonna Taylor, but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of names.
A pattern of behavior,
Violence is the entire point.
I absolutely agree that there's, there you can't just allow people to randomly destroy property, right? Okay, I'll make that point out loud.
Yeah,
However,
no, and that's a fair point too. I agree. I don't think anybody here is supporting that.
Having said that, like I said in my video earlier today, and this is a point that I think doesn't get discussed anywhere near often enough, but it's not just an American issue. Governments throughout history and around the world have traditionally had agent provocateurs on the opposing side to deliberately provoke a reaction from the official authorities. That's as old as fucking time. Every country that's ever had public demonstrations, from South Africa to India to any place in Europe and the Americas, you name it, that's been a tactic used by the authorities as a way to crush dissent, especially in authoritarian regimes. And I want to bring it back, Joe, with great respect. I understand that you're making the point about how this is political showmanship for Trump. And to the degree that that's true, I agree with you. But I think the problem is deeper than that, because I think that these troops are being put in place one city at a time, so that by the time November rolls around, he's got his people where he needs them to be.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all.
Chilling thought.
I don't disagree with that at all. It is very scary. And now to your point, no, I'm not saying that every single bit of the violence is solely the cops. That would be unfair. It would be unreal. It would not be true. However, and again, I would say out of everyone here, I am the least prone to conspiratorial thinking, as I bring up every week. But we actually have seen people who have been identified as police who have gone about. There was the one guy famously who he's dressed in tactical gear, and he goes up with a hammer and he knocks the windows out with, and the glass out in the windows, and then walks away. And the crowd are like, "What are you doing, man?" And they filmed him, and then later on they actually were able to ID the guy, and he's a fucking cop, and he's not the only.
His ex-wife doxed him.
Right, his ex-wife. So here he was a cop trying to discredit, and there's also, again, Proud Boys and all these guys trying, who and of course some of the Proud Boys actually got arrested because they actually started shooting people.
Yeah, the Boogaloo Boys.
Yes, that was in Philadelphia. That was the Green Machine was asking, does anybody know which city official said that if federal troops show up and kidnap citizens, the feds will be arrested? And that was one of the top prosecuting attorneys of Philadelphia.
Right. And here's the thing. So we know now the most of these people are Customs and Border Patrol. Now the thing is that all the reports are is that when they're nabbing people, for the people, when they say, "I want a lawyer," they let them go almost immediately. Why? Because it's an illegal detention.
Yes.
But basically, they're basically provoking. So what's happening is, we're basically using Gestapo, Stasi, secret police kind of tactics. We see somebody protesting, we're just gonna pull them off the street. No Miranda rights, no even identifying what agency we're from. And so this is another way. So that what it does, and I'm not saying people should ever riot, but what I'm saying is it is a way to try again to provoke people. Because when you basically have extra constitutional detainments happening, and people are like, and we're already protesting because we're saying, hey, the police are heavy-handed in being totalitarian, and then you see more examples of it on a daily basis, it pushes extreme people to do extreme things. But it's just like, if you think about the Middle East with Israel and the Palestinians, basically what Israel had done at one point during Netanyahu's first administration was that, well, we're not going to really honor the peace accords, and if any Palestinian anywhere does any terrorism, we're going to hold all Palestinians to account. So of course that's an impossible,
which is illegal in international law, by the way. That's called punishment, and it's actually illegal. Go ahead.
Right. So basically what they're doing is, so basically it puts up the impossible standard, because there's always going to be some radical who's going to do something. So you know what? You want to arrest the radicals? Oh, by all means. Most of the protesters would be happy to see the radicals swept off the street too. But the thing is that people are, and that's why I object when you just say rioters without any qualifications. It makes it sound like everybody out there is just throwing bricks and just causing riots, and that's not accurate.
So,
okay, I'd like to, if I can, I'd like to ask Kazum a question. Because Kazum, like, you recognize, don't you, that there is such a thing as agent provocateurs? So that might not explain every evil action. I'll grant you that, but it is a thing. I mean, it's a thing for sure. Do you accept that?
It's a thing, yes, but I mean, there are so many people there that at some of these protests that do become rioters without being provoked. They are,
And
I mean, they're
I've been
trying.
in protests.
I mean,
I've been in protests where that kind of things happen, and at least the ones I've been in London, there's everyone around them is shouting at them not to do the shit that they're doing, and they're doing it anyway. Whether they're agent provocateurs on the side of the authorities or not, there some people go to with the cover of a crowd. Just
You're number 3, boobs.
You're number 2. Go ahead, Sister Danger.
You hold up that number 3, buddy. No, so I'm still like, I'm over here just like noodling because I really find Kazum's question to be quite important, actually. What's the point of doing anything if you don't have a directed ends, to what it is that you're doing, right? And I actually super agree with that. I think in the brief 5 minutes or whatever that I've been sitting here thinking about it while drinking vodka, I think, though, that if I was to look for a real answer to your question, I would want to see something like reform of the police departments, such that the cops are that we are looking over, like either we are getting rid of cops and rehiring them, for example. That way we can say, hey, look, you have a whole bunch of things on your record and you shouldn't be a cop probably. Or we're like, and from an outside agency, from a new, not, you can't have cops reviewing cops, right? That's just like, hey, the Department of Homeland Security is innocent because the head of Gestapo says they aren't Gestapo, like, so that's not okay. So maybe something like that might be a start. And of course, I am not advocating, because it would be ridiculous to advocate that you just get rid of all the police. That's stupid. These things can be done in rolled out phases with organization. So I would say maybe I'd like to see that there was an actual plan for doing something like that. I would like to see that there are that there are other changes that I think would be much slower, at least around here, like in the greater Seattle area. For example, I think the rent and gentrification in the greater Seattle area is absolutely insane and crazy. And that needs serious reform. Yeah, it's. I think it's more than that, actually, in the greater Seattle area. It's probably true in places also like San Francisco and the big Californian areas as well. But those things happen because the states or city councils or whatever it is pass the legislation that lets people just jack up rent, or corporations come in, gentrify a place, and then displace the people that live there, because now, since you have a Starbucks on your corner, you can charge, $1,000 more a month in rent for a place. And that just it's a real thing. So I think I would maybe want to see that addressed, because I think that that's probably pretty important. But then on a wide scale, what I would love to see is actual real movement towards getting some, I would like to see congressmen have limited terms, in the Senate, things like limited terms. I'd like to see that we're, even if I would rather vote someone in that was a novice and didn't have experience, but was willing to learn and do the job and bust their butt, than to have somebody old and entrenched that can't even science, So I would love to see. I'd love to see things like our third part. Like, we're supposed to have a more than two-party system, but do you know how hard it is to even get party number 3 on a TV? Change it.
We think we're getting a bit far afield from the remit of the person.
A little bit.
But I think that even proposed legislation would be a step in the right direction for some of this stuff. Like, even if it was written up and floated out there, that would be something, right?
Yeah, what do you think would actually stop the what would stop this?
You're
What would
on
stop?
mute.
Yeah,
And
you're on mute.
And also, you're number 3, and I'm gonna cede now to you. So your
Okay.
turn.
Okay. I have a question for Kazoom. I have a question, and it's going to lead to a point. Kazoom, you always think that riots are always bad and that nothing good comes of them.
Not necessarily. There are times when they can cause enough attention to a subject for people to think about it.
Right. A riot is the voice of the unheard. When people have had enough of something, whatever that thing is, and they have no outlet, and there's no legal way to fix their problem, there's no way that the system can address the issue that they have, things reach a boiling point, and a riot happens. You are an openly gay man. You owe the fact that you have not been thrown off the top of a building for being gay to a riot. Stonewall riot in New York City. In 1969, June 28th, the whole bar full of Queens took to the streets and threw bricks at cops and lit fires and turned cars over. And it spread through the entire section of the city. And it went on for days. And it was
not 50 days, though.
Well, we're not having rioting, though.
It was a little bit of a different situation, different times, different situation, but still, it was a riot. I mean, you want to talk about like matters of degrees, then that's just so. But you owe the fact that you're openly gay and can go on the internet and tell everybody, about your sexual proclivities, to the fact that there was a riot. So yeah, riots can lead to very good things.
But this here, there doesn't. I mean, some of the demands from some of the people when they get interviewed are just the demands are over the top. Those things are never going to happen. So I mean, what will actually stop these riots?
Like what demands? Like what demands? And please don't repeat one that you said last week because they've already been thoroughly.
Actually, I'm actually curious to hear this answer too, just because I don't know what currently has been said about that. So this is actually new news to me. I'm just interested to hear. Like, what are they asking for? And when we say they, do we mean like BLM representatives?
I don't know if they're BLM representatives. I know that there have been some BLM representatives that have said things like, if we don't get our way, we're going to burn this country to the ground. We're going to burn this country to ashes. But there are people that they're like the BLM New York the head of BLM New York had said that. They also were saying that they demand demographical equity. They demand, some of them are demanding the defunding of the police. There's
defunding of the police is a good thing, Kazoom.
Well, I think
I don't agree. Defunding the police is not a good thing.
I have seen that the people on opposite sides of that argument have very different understandings of what is meant by defund the police.
Sister Danger, hang on a second. I want to hear Kazoom explain
what he thinks that means.
What he thinks people are talking about.
Well, there are some people that are pushing to literally abolish the police.
Okay, that's not defunding the police. So
I'm just saying, but that's been a push as well.
But that's not what we're talking about.
When it comes to
Kazoom, we're talking about defunding the police. We're not talking about abolishing them. We're talking about defunding. You
earlier were asking what are some of the ridiculous things being asked, and
you answered. You said defunding the police. So now explain to me why that's a bad thing.
Because if you take away money from the police, it's not going to suddenly stop them from being violent. It's not going to help that. It's not going to do anything about that.
That's not the goal. And I'm glad you said that, because that's not the goal of defunding the police. Defunding the police means you take some of the resources that you're giving to the police department and you give it to
put them into something else.
You give it to other agencies that can handle those problems better.
Right.
That way, you're not sending a man with a gun to every single call, because not all calls need a man with a gun. Right. Some do, and the police should go to those. Right. They should have the funding to answer those calls. But if somebody's dog is loose, you're not going to send a man with a gun, because what you're going to end up having is a shot dog and a crying kid.
Right.
You know? So
which happens thousands of times a year. Well, and
It happens 1,000 times a year.
To your point, so to kind of address your question, Kazum, and also to something that Amy said a little bit ago. As far as legislation goes, okay, because this is where I think it needs to go, and where we are right now. So basically, there's a few things. It has to, for me. If it ends up just being half measures, then it was all a waste. And that's what happened in the past. You know, if you think about the whole riots, the Rodney King riots were about the same issue 25 years ago. Almost 30 years ago. So the thing is that one is part of it is the defunding the police, is really changing the nature of policing and basically segregate out those things that there's certain things. Yeah, well, if someone's running around with a gun going to shoot people, I absolutely want the cops to go there and do something about it. But there's a lot of things that they get called on they shouldn't be doing. Secondly, we need to see that there's actually legislation coming on, which is what to Sister Danger's point. Now, here's the thing where legislation is. The Democrats actually have in the House a bill, which I believe they actually passed, which does a lot of the things that would make the situation better. And now it's on the federal level, because now remember, there's a limit to what Congress can do, because a lot of this stuff happens at the state level and the local level. So Congress only can deal with federal money. But basically, their goal is let's demilitarize the police. They shouldn't be showing up in tactical gear and doing breaches every time they serve a warrant, which is happening more and more often. So the problem right now, though, with getting legislation through is that the Senate, the Republican-controlled Senate, has zero interest in doing anything about it. And secondly, and this is a kind of a one issue with it's not an issue I have with the protest in general. It's just an unfortunate kind of result, is that where the protests have the most strength are like Portland and Seattle. These are blue areas. The protests need to be protesting in the Republican areas to get Republican House and Senate members on board to realize that, hey, this is a large movement. The problem is that we know that in these areas where there are red, there are heavily armed right wingers who are totally prepared to shoot people.
Can't they just get COVID?
Well, and that's the thing, and so we're about that. I was like, think about that. It's not safe to protest peacefully in red areas because fucking right wingers, they won't throw bricks, they will shoot people. Will. And we know this because some of them showed up to the blue areas and shot people. So that's where I get so incensed, and that's where I get irritated. We can look at the extremists on our side and say, hey, that's bad. I'm with you. I'll totally agree with all of that. But we have to stop pretending that that's the majority, and we have to start realizing that what's become the majority, the mainstream of the right wing, is way more fucking violent than anything coming out of the left. And you think about that when I mentioned several times before in Michigan, when people were mad about wearing masks. That's simple. Not police nabbing them off the streets and people getting beat up and shot and killed. They were told they had to wear a fucking mask, and they showed up to the state capitol with AR-15s ready to kill legislators.
Storms at the Capitol.
I wasn't even on the same fucking plane. That's the thing where I get mad, man. It's not even close. It's not even fucking close. And I have to argue with right wingers every fucking day over this shit. And they're more than happy for a totalitarian. They just want their totalitarian.
Yes, that is so true.
And that's one real quick. And that's why I get so mad at Kate for trying to split hairs over little fucking differences on the left. I'm like, you know what? If you're not going to vote to stop fucking fascism, then shut the fuck up. You're not a progressive. You're a fucking baby.
I disassociate myself from a personal attack like that.
I want to say that I disagree with Sister Danger about rent control. I don't believe that we should do that sort of rent control, because the people who own those rental properties, they are businessmen themselves, and they deserve to make a wage themselves. I just think that the prevailing wages in places where you pay high rent should be to where you make 400% more than what that rent is. Rent should be about a quarter of what your income is. So if that place charges $2,000 a month to stay in that one-bedroom apartment, you should be able to find a job where you get paid $8,000 a month.
Oh, real quick, just to Paul's point, I wasn't attacking Kate specifically. She was in part of the group of people I was attacking, but it wasn't specifically at her. I'm just breaking up the point as to why I get so mad at her.
Just an example.
I'm not going to argue about it. I just, it made me uncomfortable. That's it.
This is referring to last week, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Further to the conversation, though, that's why I got back on the camera. Similar to what Joe and Rob just said a moment ago. What most disturbs me, or maybe not most disturbs me, but what disturbs me very greatly about what's going on in Portland and now is going on as well in Seattle, I understand. And Trump wants to expand it to further cities,
Department of Homeland Security landed last night at SeaTac.
What really bothers me about it, as I said before, A, there's no end game, and B, I mean, like the guy in Philadelphia said that you mentioned before, Sister Danger, who basically said, hey, if they come and break our laws, we're going to arrest them. Yes. I think that should be the approach nationwide. I think if you're going to come and you're going to have no insignia, no name, I cannot identify you in any way. Yes. So even if I get you in court, I can't find you in a lineup and you were right there in my face and I still couldn't identify you. Yeah. If someone's unidentifiable, they should not be enforcing the law.
Yes.
Actually, I've heard that there's actually do have a badge number on their arm.
They don't.
Okay, and let's just say
not that makes a huge difference, but just saying, just
okay,
saying.
Fair play. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. I've heard both things actually, and I don't know which to believe. Let me just make a point though, real quick. Whether there's a number or not, you cannot identify their face. You cannot see anything about them. Who's to say what number goes to what person? And furthermore, who's to say that these people necessarily work for the government?
Yes.
They're hired.
The fucking receipts. Show me the fucking paper trail to the fucking chain of command. Where does it go? From the bottom to the top, I want to know everybody who's responsible so they can go up in fucking court in a couple of years when we throw these fuckers out.
They're not even
if I shoot one in the head and my defense is he looked like a boogaloo boy who was trying to kidnap me.
Yeah.
If he looked like a boogaloo boy, I'm getting off.
Right. Well, and to that point, if a soldier, the reason why soldiers in combat, they have to wear the emblem and the insignia, they have to wear the uniform of the nation that they're fighting for. It's actually a violation of the Geneva Convention. So that was an issue in the beginning in Afghanistan because special forces guys started dressing like the Pashto people, so they were wearing the full Pashto garb because they fit in. And then someone noticed they were on TV, and they were like, "Hey, you can't do that. That's what's a war crime."
They are largely not even law enforcement. Like there are some agents from Border Patrol there, but a lot of them are actually hired through Eric Prince. So they're not military. They're not law enforcement. They are not working as professionals as an agency of the government. They're hired mercenaries. So what they are doing is illegal.
Right.
So any city that decides that they're going to arrest them are fully within their rights to do so.
Legal
they're not officers.
Yeah, those of you guys who are familiar with the Legal Eagle channel, great. He's a lawyer, really great channel, and he did a really long video about exactly what the authority of the Customs and Border Patrol actually is and what they can and can't do. So it's really valuable to watch. And based on his analysis, it's very much in violation of people's constitutional rights, which is again why they're letting people go if they hire for a lawyer, because they don't want to have to identify themselves. They don't want to have anything on record because they'll lose. They'll go to jail.
And for the one person, maybe it was two, but one person, Curious, in the chat who talked about being anti-Antifa. Antifa is anti-fascist. So if you're anti-Antifa,
they're not just anti-fascists though. They're anarcho-communists.
Oh, thank God.
Okay.
They hold up a communist flag. They use the hammer and sickle symbol all the time.
Let me ask you a question, Kazoom. When you woke up this morning, what country were you in?
The United States.
Right. And this country has a constitution, right?
Yeah.
And attached to that constitution, there is a Bill of Rights, which is a bill of amendments to that constitution, correct?
Yeah.
And the first one, that very first amendment Do you know what it says?
First Amendment is freedom of speech.
And expression. Yes. Yes. So if somebody is flying a flag that you don't like, tough.
But it's the fact that you just said that all they are anti-fascists. They're not just anti-fascists. They represent anarcho-communism.
Some of them do, and some of them are radical capitalists. Some of them are, you name it on the spectrum, they're everywhere. Why? Because it isn't an organized group that has a leadership or an infrastructure. It's a bunch of people saying, I'm against fascism, and I'm also for a whole spectrum of things. Kazoom, you can't just take the ones that you don't like of the group because you don't like them and then assign those values to everyone. That's not how reality works. That's how cult mentality works.
But they act like cult members.
They who? I'm
Antifa. The people that are blatantly part of Antifa. They dress a certain way. They act a certain way. They have the same kind of attitudes. I've had to deal with Antifa myself, and I almost got my camera destroyed just because I dared to film them. You know, they usually have this certain kind of attitude. There's things they have in common.
Well, look, I would say, are there people that are radical? Absolutely, there's no doubt about that. But the thing is, again, they're not a single group. So it's that's what I was saying before. It's like, are there people like that? I don't doubt it at all. I do not doubt you for 1 second. But what I'm saying is, they also don't represent everybody in that group either.
I mean, when there's huge groups of them all yelling, "All cops are bastards" over and over again, what is that supposed to say?
Actually, you should look up ACAB.
Oh yes, it has a different meaning. It means something different than the words they're using. Okay.
Well, I want to make an analogy real quick. So, okay, I don't really follow sports much. The only sports I really know anything about are baseball. But you know, the Yankees are a team, the Mets are a team, the Dodgers are a team. So think of the various sub factions within Antifa as sports teams. So if the Yankees go and do something really egregious, that doesn't mean the Mets are on the hook for it just because they're all in Major League Baseball. That's kind of how I would put it.
Okay.
So what you're doing, you're saying, well, the Yankees did something, so everybody in baseball is fucked up. That's what you keep doing over and over. That's what I'm a little frustrated about.
Okay, so I feel like it's super super important to differentiate between some of the terms that are being used. And so first of all, I am pretty securely of the opinion that Black Bloc, which falls under the banner of Antifa, Antifa being short for anti-fascist. Anybody that literally is against fascism can say that they are Antifa. That is the biggest, highest level of this umbrella. Okay. And then it goes down from here. Like you're saying, you know, there's all kinds of people with the different things, and Black Bloc is one of them. Black Bloc is a problem. They are a problem in the same way that anybody is the militant of any side is a problem, because they are instigators, they are bad actors, and they are there to be that thing. So
they had the riot the day before Trump's inauguration.
They've done a lot of different stuff.
Right before the Women's March, the day before the Women's March, there was a riot in D.C. that the right wing tried to blame on the Women's March. It was Black Bloc.
I don't know what you're talking about, so I can't speak to it. But I wouldn't be surprised, because that is what they do. They purposefully instigate, and they definitely do all of the things that Kazoom is saying. They share the same political views. They dress the same when they go out. That is why they are called the Black Bloc, because they're all wearing black and they all have their helmets and their whatevers that they've got with them. They are a real thing. They exist, and they consider themselves Antifa because the umbrella of Antifa is so large. I feel like it's so incredibly important. My neighbor that lives across the way from me literally believes that Antifa is an official organization with like a membership roster of people that are in it. All she does is watch Fox News. So she's a Fox News person. But that's what they're saying in that media. And I'm not saying that this is what Kazoom believes, but I think it's really important to differentiate, for example, because these lines are being purposefully blurred. The Proud Boys They are an organization with a membership list that vet their members. I have gone through every piece of their media, of their speeches, of everything I could find of those people, and looked at that. And it is not what Antifa is being presented as. That is a club. I think that there is a difficult differentiation to make, because the original idea of Antifa is just this: you're against fascism. But when you say are a college student, right, and you do things like, how did you discover this? Well, I was taking political science classes and doing the whatever, and so I was going to my college meetups with other people who are against this, and we have a club, and our club gets together, we make signs, we go to protests, right? This is not an organized group, right? But it is, in the sense that everybody is in this really small little, we all go to Evergreen College and we do the thing, and we all go and protest together. But I just feel like it's important to understand how it can be seen, yes, as a group of people that share these similar ideas, they dress the same, they do the same thing, without being like having a national registry and bank accounts where they are collecting funds literally for the organization thereof, right? So I don't know. I feel like that gets so confused in the news, and that people that aren't close to it or don't. And I'm not saying that's you, Kazum. But I mean, this is like literally my neighbor across and she's nice. I mean, I like my neighbor, like we get along, but she's super Republican, right wing, and the things she says to me are this. She's just like, yeah, but the Antifas. And I asked her one day, I was like, if I went to your church, because she's Mormon, and I said, if I went to your church, would that make me a Mormon? And she's like, well, no. And I said, so if I go to a rally, does that make me Antifa? Does that make me a Proud Boy if I just go there and observe the thing? How do you know if I'm just there observing or if I am one of those things? And the way that we differentiate between you're one of those things or somebody has accused me in some neo-McCarthy kind of a way of being a pinko commie is there a roster? Is this an organization? Do they get funds? Do they have some kind of a 501c3 that they're collecting everybody's money? And, that's how we differentiate between is this a real group that's got a political agenda versus a bunch of people that happen to be in line right now with a political movement.
Well, there is some gathering. There is some organizational element to some factions of Antifa. There are places where they organize and have meetings and such. That does happen, but it's not all of them. It's not all of them, but it might be the Black Bloc. It might be, but there is an organizational factor to some elements of Antifa.
Right. Now, and that's true. And now the thing is, like I said, for me, now I'm against fascism. So someone could put the Antifa label on me, but I'm straight up capitalist, man. So I also argue against the whole idea that capitalism is what's the problem is. Like I said, to me, it's laissez-faire. Unregulated capitalism is a problem, and because I also know that every system is a problem when if not properly regulated. We have good examples of leftist and rightist situations that were fucked up because the people at the top running it were horrible. So, but yeah, so, and actually, are the people you're talking about, even though I would call myself anti-fascist, I've had people attack me and say that I'm some horrible person because I have employees, and that somehow that's that automatically makes me an exploiter, even though I made less money last year than every other full-time person in the business because it was an off year. So apparently my labor has no value apparently, but so I know the people you're talking about exist. But yeah, for me, it's all about putting them in perspective. But I mean, of course, and the figures, of course, Curious likes the Proud Boys a little bit because, a little fascist.
I just feel like there needs to be a different way to refer. There needs to be a differentiating terminology because it's so easy for these things to be equivocated to one another and then have that be purposefully blurred, you know?
I have to jump in here. Sorry, Rob. I'm sorry. I'll be right off. But it serves Trump's interest to have this umbrella term be too overly applied. That's the whole point. He wants, as you imply, basically, he wants every protester to be perceived as Antifa, right? And quite frankly, if we are therefore to use the umbrella widest description of what Antifa means, then every protester should be Antifa, right? Because we should all be against fascism. That shouldn't be up for debate. Fascism shouldn't get a political party. You know what I mean? That's not okay in the United States of America. So, to me, it's kind of like, Antifa should be everybody's default position as far as being anti-fascist is concerned. I'll go ahead and say what you're going to say.
No, I was going to say that the different factions that are basically embed themselves into Antifa type movements and stuff, or into the Antifa movement, count on the fact that it is such a broad term and that it covers so many people. They count on that. And what ends up happening is what we see. And we end up seeing people, I'm not going to say Kazum, I'm just going to say people, defining everyone and as the worst element. Like the worst element defines the entire spectrum of people, and that's unfortunate. And it's nearly impossible, though, on a practical level, to really, differentiate between these people, like Sister Danger is saying that we would be nice if we could do. I also wanted to say something about what Merely a Fan said about 10 minutes ago. No, 3 minutes ago. It might have been more. I don't know. Said something about
what is time?
Yeah, I know. What is
I don't even know what day it is. I mean, quarantine.
Let's ponder that one for a little while. Yeah, about 7 minutes ago. Because it's such a loosely unorganized, non-organized thing, that it ends up being a double-edged sword, and that's a lot like Occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street was fantastic, and its decentralized nature, the decentralized nature of the movement was its strength. It was also its weakness.
Right.
And I think Antifa as a movement has that same problem.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, a good, comical example is if you think about the movie Life of Brian, how you had the Judean People's Front, the People's Front of Judea, and so you had all these different little groups, and that's generally how it always is. But so I think in the past, and certainly there were like movements in the early 70s that were like that. You had a lot of different groups, and so the downside of having that loose affiliation is, unfortunately, if someone stinks, you get some of the stench on you. Even if you're not wearing the same cologne or you've bathed and they haven't, you're unfortunately, and again, people, as Paul said, people are going to use that against you, whether it's fair or not. And again, that's to me the reason why I worry. As much as I will look at the radicals that Kazum is talking about, and again, I've run into them, I've been attacked by them. So yeah, to Curious, to your point, yes, I have been attacked online by the people that Kazum is talking about. And they're really fucking obnoxious. But I also don't worry about them as much because, one, they're not as numerous. They don't have any political power, and they're not backed up. The worst of the left is not backed up by anybody who matters in politics. Whereas when I look at the Proud Boys and all that, they're backed up by what's considered the mainstream on the right wing right now, and members of Congress. Louis Gohmert and company love those people. And so that's to me why they're more dangerous. And again, Antifa's throwing rocks, and Proud Boys are throwing 223 hollow point or semi-jacketed. So that's to me, the level of peril is quite different.
Can I just say that
something that
oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to say one of the things that comes into this as well is people are labeling all Trump supporters as fascist. That's another element to this too, where it's like, well, I understand pushing against actual fascism, but there's this notion that a lot of Antifa have. If someone wears a MAGA hat, oh, you're a fascist. It's just like, well, that doesn't mean they're a fascist.
It's kind of hard for most people to see Trump, see the things that he's done, see the things that he says that he supports, sees the support that he gets from known fascist organizations, and then see somebody who supports him and not think that that person is also a fascist. If you're not a fascist, why would you support fascism?
I feel like
That's
that
why.
state.
Well, do you honestly think that Trump is fascist?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes, I do.
By definition.
Oh,
Yes.
I would not have said that 4 years ago, and Kazum 4 years ago, I would have agreed with your statement that just because somebody supported him doesn't mean they're fascist. But I believe that in this presidency, the term of this presidency, too many things have now happened, and those things, they're not one-off incidences, it is a collective of them. And at this point, a person can't possibly support this guy and everything he's done, all the things that he stands for and continues to do. And even if inadvertently or unwittingly be supporting that, because I do think that it's possible that people don't perceive themselves that way, right? But they yet are supporting that system. They might not know it. They might not realize it. That happens all the time. I am the kind of person that wants to give the benefit of the doubt. I'd rather believe that you're ignorant as opposed to like such a complete fucking idiot, pardon my French, because I'm nice like that. But you know, but yeah, at this point I just don't think anymore. How can it be a question? Like,
well, okay, I'm just curious. Why do you label him as a fascist?
I mean, by his own words. By his own words, he's sending federal forces into cities that are run by the opposing party. By his own words, basically, he's saying, if you are not on my page, you are an enemy of the state, and I will treat you as such.
It goes further than that. It goes further than that.
I would add a few more things too.
I mean, call me old-fashioned, but I, as far as I'm concerned, fascism, that line was crossed when we had concentration camps on American soil. You know what I mean? I mean, when AOC first said that, everyone goes, "Oh, she's just being whatever." She's trying to get her profile up or whatever. Hang on, but bottom line is a concentration camp. George Takei was in the concentration camps in World War II. Mr. Sulu on Star Trek. And a concentration camp, by definition, is a camp is internment because of who you are, not because of what you've done. Okay, we have had concentration camps on the United States soil since 2017, and all by itself.
But they were there before 2017 as well.
No.
He did ramp it up, but they were still there.
It's not as if we haven't had internment for people who were illegal crossing the border, but what Trump did was a punitive internment, right? And he denied people their constitutional right to apply for asylum. He just put them in a cage and left them there instead of letting them apply for asylum and get into the country legally like they were entitled to do.
The Constitution applies. The Constitution of the United States applies to every person inside the country of the United States and all of the territories of the United States.
Also, habeas corpus is also to all people. Sorry, I'm just adding that in too because it's with that.
Whether they are citizens or not, regardless of their status, whether they came here legally or illegally, whether they're here on a visa and it expired, or whether they were born here or they were naturalized, it doesn't matter. The Constitution, in the wording of the Constitution, it says all people. All people. Right. So when you start locking people up for coming over the border, trying to apply for asylum, you are literally denying them the constitutional rights that they are entitled to just by being on American soil. The fact that he did that, yes, Trump is a fascist.
Okay, what if he would have just, instead of even putting them in those camps, what if he would have just deported them? Would that still have been fascist?
No.
If he denied them their rights to apply for citizenship, yeah, it still would have been bad. He's still denying them their rights. It's still wrong. It's still bad.
I just want to reiterate, I mean, at least personally for me, it is not just a one thing. So I guess when I hear this, I'm like, this is just one of several issues. Like for me, other issues that compound this are the suppression of the press is a huge issue for me. Like having the people that are his troops or whatever going out there and taking down people who are identified as members of the press, arresting them, throwing them in jail, taking their cameras, destroying their media, and then in all the other ways that he like the literal attacks on basically saying that anything that comes out of any possible like press outlet that maybe has a slight blue leaning is all just fake news, and that the only real news is what he tells you. This to me is very fascist. Like that behavior is super fascist, and to me super concerning, right? So to me, that is a huge red flag. The post office, his aggressions toward the USPS, our postal system, and voter suppression are these extreme red flags to me.
The Postal Service, real quick, I'm going to interject on you like you did to me.
That's fine.
The Postal Service is one of the most successful government agencies in the history of our country. Lately, they've had problems only because Congress has redefined how they have to handle their money. But up until that point, the Postal Service really had very few problems. It's one of the most successful, most reliable government agencies, and it's one of the oldest government agencies in the country. And all of a sudden now, we're not sure if it's going to be around in November because of the election. Because of Trump.
And the reason why is because he doesn't want mail-in ballots, because he knows that chances are if everybody gets to vote, he will be voted out in a landslide is an understatement. So that's totalitarian tactics. I mean everything, and again this latest thing, using people, basically using Customs and Border Patrol and using basically mercenaries to round people up outside beyond the remit of and the jurisdiction of the people, and holding people in ways that violate their constitutional rights. It's what look, things happen. Sometimes cops will do something that will violate somebody's rights, but as a whole, it's not baked into the cops to do that. But when you send people out there that even their mere presence and picking, if they grab one person, unless that person is attacking or damaging a federal building, that's literally the limit of their authority. So they're not allowed to enforce state laws or local laws. So if unless they grab somebody, and even if they do grab somebody from attacking or damaging a federal building, they're supposed to Mirandize them. There's a whole process that they have to follow. If they do that and they basically do a special rendition, effectively grab somebody and hide them somewhere and don't even let anybody know where they are, that violates the Constitution in many ways. And that is the germ of a totalitarian state. So even if you could look past all the other shit and say, well, maybe it flirts with fascism, flirts with totalitarianism, but it doesn't quite cross the line, I might disagree or disagree. But this is unmistakable. This is the tactic of the tin pan dictator, of the junta. This is what North Korea does. This is
what's a junta? Is that the word you just said?
Yeah, Junta.
You're on mute, Goth. You're on mute. And what's a junta?
Junta that's basically it's a Spanish word, and basically has to do with a totalitarian totalitarian coup, basically where you have.
If this was happening in Chile or anywhere else in South America, really, we would have no hesitation in calling this fascism. That's just a fact. We wouldn't even pause to call it fascism.
If this was happening in another country, almost anywhere in the world, the U.S. would send troops to stop it from happening.
And I'm going to remake a point in a different way to one that Joe's made several times already in discussions in the Breakfast Club. These troops are so unaccountable right now. And even our troops in war, Joe, are more accountable than these guys. And
yes, they are.
Cops who are less accountable than our troops in war are more accountable than these guys. So these guys are less accountable than the police in a time when we've got millions of people marching against police brutality. And I'm sure everyone's seen the footage of that guy who's a veteran who had the guy getting clubbed for standing in the street. There's absolutely indefensible behavior. You cannot call that law enforcement.
Right.
You're trying to provoke a reaction. If you're that violent, there's no other answer than you're trying to provoke a response.
That dude is a beast. He took a beat unfazed.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. He wasn't rioting. He wasn't even protesting necessarily. He went over there to ask them a question because he wanted to find out. He wanted to make sure that the people protesting would be safe. And he was asking for basically clarification as to what they could and couldn't do and where they were going to go, and just kind of work things out with the cops in advance so there would be less violence and less. And all they did was beat the shit out of him. And that, you know, that's again, that wouldn't be defensible under any banner, because he certainly was not a rioter. He wasn't a leader, and he wasn't breaking any laws at all, and certainly nothing that those guys would have had jurisdiction over in any case. They just didn't like him, and they wanted to beat him up. And that's the thing. That's the kind of stuff that provokes riots, because people see that and they say, "Well, Jesus Christ! If the people charged with keeping order are disorderly themselves, and we can't, and they're violating our constitutional rights, and no one's doing anything about it, then all I can do is to take the law in my own hands."
So can I just say real quick, it has nothing to do with what you guys are saying, but Goth, I posted a link in the private chat if you want to. I don't know if you want to share it with people, but it's actually to a really good thread from a Harvard law professor on explaining why what is happening in Portland is breaching the Constitution. And so it's a pretty easy read and pretty succinct, you know, layman's terms, if you will, but it's a good read. If you wanted to share that. I'm done. Whoever's next.
Yeah, and my biggest worry about it, and Paul has said about this lasting beyond the election, that's a potential problem. Yeah. My immediate worry, beyond just the obvious, is that this is setting up, again, to go into blue cities, the blue areas, and I think that this is a pretext to try to prevent people from literally prevent people from voting. Because he knows that's the only way he can hold on to office is to basically pull out third world dictatorship and to try to stop people from actually voting.
I actually don't think that Trump is smart enough to organize any of this on his own. I think it's
Stephen Miller.
I think what Joe said is exactly what's going on. Like I said, I think he wants to put his little chess pieces in place, one city at a time, until he feels he has enough, not only to intimidate the vote, which is something that hadn't crossed my mind. So thank you, because that's kind of, for me now, is a duh moment. I'm like, how did I not think of that? But for me, it was more to the point of after the election, because he's already made noises publicly about how he might not accept the result, which is out fucking rageous for anyone who's a candidate for the presidency, much less the sitting president, to say that.
I'm unconvinced. I will actually admit to, I mean, I know that that's a talking point, but I'm pretty unconvinced that even Donald Trump could be like, I just ignore it, right? Because he's already done things that have caused small sections of the GOP to be like, whoa, this is too far. And they have turned against him or stopped their support of him. And a president can't do that, is what I'm saying. Like, he can't just say, I just ignore it. And what's he going to do? Just continue to sit there? They will literally just arrest him and take him out of the White House.
He's priming us, because basically is what he always does. He pushes the line, he steps over the line, and then sometimes people push back. And when that happens, I was joking, or he makes up all excuses.
Right, but in order for that to actually occur,
in some cases, when people didn't push back, he stayed over the line.
But that would require literally all of Congress, all of the Joint Chiefs, all of the military to be at his back. And I do not think he has that. Our military has been largely silent on this, with a couple, a few weeks ago, that general who came out and was like, I'm so sorry, I was photographed with this asshole, right? So our military is largely silent on this, right? I do not think he has the ability to just say, I'm just going to keep sitting here. I mean, he might think he does, but I sort of feel like that is actually a little alarmist. I don't know.
Person, woman, man, camera, TV.
Well, see, here's the thing. I think you're right as far as would he be successful at it? I agree with you. The question is, will he try it? I don't think it's alarmist to say that he's likely to try it. And
That's fair.
and the problem is that in the constitutional crisis that is going to be created when he tries some shit, that it's just going to cause a lot of problems. And because he does have the support of at least 30-something% of the population, that's going to cause a lot of problems, and a lot of people are going to get hurt.
Yeah, they probably also think the Earth is flat too.
Yeah, but they have guns.
You know, I just have to point out, like, I have this small little nugget of irony that's been bouncing around my head because, you know, for all of the, okay, you know, you pussy snowflake, liberal, millennial, whatevers, right? I'm like, you know, you guys are sure out there a lot with your guns against a bunch of people that you think are a class of wusses. What are y'all so worried about, right? Like, this is what I want to know. And
well, I mean, that's just like that's like the lazy immigrants who live on welfare and assistance that are stealing their jobs at the same time.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, and that is the thing. Always kind of funny. I think right wingers. There's a lot. They're a fear-based group. I mean, not that we don't have fear in the left too, but
of course,
fundamentally, most of the right-wing rhetoric and their policy is based on fear.
They're bully boys.
And the irony of it is, to go to your point. So if you listen to them when they talk about not needing government and stuff like this, and we don't need the government to manage people's affairs, they say this all the time. Like, we need small government, get people out of governments off people's back. But when they are in power, when you look at their policies are not based on the notion that people can manage their affairs without government in their way. Their policies are based on the idea that everyone is a complete scumbag and needs some authoritarian rule. Think about drug laws. Because if they actually believe what they said about getting people off the government out of people's backs, and again, there are some libertarians that are pro drug, but they should all say we don't need drug laws because you have the right to do it with your body whatever you want. But they don't actually believe that. They don't believe it with abortion. There's so many things where
that's so true.
Where they constantly restrict because they don't believe it can be managed.
Hey, you just ask them whether or not they think you could be a prostitute.
They believe they believe in small government when it comes to the way business is done, and they believe in huge government when it comes to people's personal lives.
Exactly.
Yep, it's not right.
So Kate's not here, so I just wanted, on her behalf, to say something mean to Joe. What I want to say is I absolutely believe that Joe Biden could, on Fifth Avenue, shoot Joe, and Joe would still vote for Joe Biden.
Because the alternative is worse. See, Trump bad. That's the thing. That's always what I try to the point. It doesn't always play. Some people, to me, just don't get it. But when I'm given a bunch of choices, some choices are phantom choices. They don't really exist. Like I could take them, but they're not really going to lead to anything. So when as an engineer, when you have to evaluate possibilities, you say, okay, I can do X, Y, Z, elemental P, Q, R, X, T, and then you have to evaluate. If this happens, this is based on our calculations, this is the result. And based on this other choice, this other result. And then you compare them and say, okay, what's the best choice based on the results? Not because of what I want it to be, but based on what's there. And as I've said for years, the choices that are available to us, the choices we want to make are not always the choices we wish to make. So given that, sometimes we have to choose between things that are not necessarily, two things that neither of us would what we would prefer to choose.
Okay.
But
that's where I'm coming from this year for this election, and I fully respect that level of pragmatism. But I also respectfully suggest that there's more than one way to be right about something. If you attach yourself to a certain set of beliefs and principles, and those things are what matter to you, if you can't live with yourself, if you go against them, I can't blame you for not doing that. No matter what the other consequence, you have to be able to live with your decisions. You have to be able to live with your choices. Otherwise, there's no point in having choices.
And I agree with you, Paul. Here's the thing, though. When you have to do that thing, can I live with myself? You have to look at the result of all the choices. So
look, I hear you, man. You don't have to sell it to me, Joe. You don't have to sell it to me. I get both sides of the argument, but like I just said a minute ago, there's more than one way to be right.
No, and I agree with that. And I agree with that.
For me, ultimately, as an entity, as a human being, I have to be true to myself, and therefore I have to allow other people that same perspective. If someone says this is what matters to them, and it really does, and it's part of who they are, you can't ask them to betray that.
Well, but again,
I just think it's not fair.
But my point is, though, in some cases, some of the choices they take will betray them. They just don't or refuse to recognize.
I get it. I get it. Like I say, I get it. You know, I do. I see both sides of it. That's all. I don't think one's more right than the other. That's just the thing. I think each person has to follow their own way to live at peace with themselves. Because if you're not at peace with yourself, you've got nothing. You know. Just my opinion.
I know. I'm just
now.
Well, and that's what I'm doing. I can't live with myself if I allow him to get back in office. I can't live with that result. Even if Joe Biden shot me, I still could not live with the result of Trump being reelected.
I mean, speaking of shooting people, I just want to know who is the Dick Cheney of Trump's administration? Because seriously, the amount of things that these guys are doing, I'm like, who is the mastermind here? Like,
I think for the first 2 or 3 months, it was Steve Bannon.
Yeah, now
that guy's an alcoholic. He's like a KKK alcoholic.
Yeah, Steve Miller is the one that's driving stuff.
Steve Miller is evil. Steve Miller is evil. I mean, his own family has come out in the press and said he's evil. I mean,
I mean. Well, that's the thing. Well, here's the difference, though. It's Dick Cheney for all of his faults, and there are many. Dick Cheney wasn't dumb. I think he was kind of a bad guy, and here's the other thing too. Again, about Dick Cheney, as much as I disagree with him on almost everything, Dick Cheney, on some level, cares about America. Trump.
Yeah, it's kind of like a
fuck.
Right. He's a typical politician, or a product of the political machine.
Right.
Yes. Oh God, who was it? The old guy dead now.
Oh, that's now.
That's
no Republican. He was a war captive.
John McCain.
White guy.
John McCain. Thank you. Yes, kind of like that. Like, as much as I disagree with John McCain, at least I felt like he cared about America.
Exactly.
You know?
No, I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
I don't like Trump. I don't like the things that he does, but I don't know whether or not we can honestly say that he doesn't care about the country. I don't know.
I don't even think he cares about anything.
There's no evidence.
I think he cares more about himself. I think Trump cares more about Trump.
Yeah.
There's no evidence to support the idea that he does give a shit at all about the country.
I don't even think he cares about the people around him, because what he really cares, because you think about it, he attacks his subordinates, his loyal subordinates all the time. He basically, if you either do what I want the way I want and get the result that I want, or you are. Think about when Jeff Sessions was still in office, and Jeff Sessions did pretty much everything Trump wanted except recuse himself, because that was the legal thing to do. And Trump attacked him and belittled him until he made him resign. Trump doesn't care about anything except Trump. I don't even think he cares about his family, and I'm not even exaggerating.
Most of the things that Trump has done, especially in the last 2 years, has been self-protection. It's all self-protection.
Agreed. Okay, but I think
what do you think about his wanting to protect the monuments and the and that whole side of things?
He's done nothing about that. He claims he did, but there was already a law in place protecting those monuments, and the sentences that he said that we should give to people are already the prescribed sentences. So, I mean, he just took a law that already existed and said, look what I'm doing. praise me for protecting your granite and marble statues. And it's really nonsense, because you know what? We support taking statues down. We do it all over the world.
I think it's dog whistling. That is what I think it is. I think that
and showboating. I say showboating.
I wouldn't say showboating, except for that there's a specific conversation, a specific social conversation surrounding the taking down of statues. And it is, I think it's pretty well known that the conversation has to do with the statues are of people who were known to be racist or known to be slave owners, et cetera, et cetera. That's why people want them taken down. And the people that do not want them taken down are the same people that are arguing, I should be able to fly my Confederate flag. I should be able to, this is just preserving history. And that there's no reason ever at all that these things should come down. So when I basically see that there's this little social issue going on, and that Trump is like his administration, because I don't think he actually does anything. Like a guy can barely read it. They probably write his teleprompter in crayon. But I think that they see that, and they recognize that this is an issue that their people, their supporters, are going to feel something about, and they are using it to call those people out, to flag to them that
Okay, I have to emphatically agree with that, obviously. But however, I think it's the problem with that is that Trump's base, he's already got them. Yep. He doesn't need to appeal to them anymore. They would follow him into a volcano.
Paul, you know what's kind of funny about that is I think the more he tries to secure his base, the more of them he scares off.
I hope so.
Yeah,
I really do think so. I think because it's kind of like he's tightening his grip on people he already has, and some of them are starting to back away, going, "Wait a minute, dude, you're kind of crazy." I don't think it's really working for him. But yeah,
okay, I have to add something on you're kind of crazy thing, because my other half has a theory that Trump has been laying the groundwork for, if he loses the election and decides to bow out, that he will claim that he is not cognitively prepared to stand trial, and therefore escape.
Person, woman, man, camera, TV.
It's not just that. He did the whole dishwashers and showers speech last week again, and all that stuff. And he talks about the suburbs being invaded and blah, blah, blah. He sounds like he's gone completely over the edge. And the fact that he doesn't sound like he's gone completely over the edge to some people is terrifying to me.
Shazoom, it sounded like you were about to ask, what are you talking about?
Well, yeah, what's the dishwashers and shower thing?
Okay, he said you put your dishwasher on, and it goes through the whole cycle, and it doesn't use enough water. So the person who does the dishes pushes the button again. Now that I'm president, you have more water in your dishwasher. You only have to do one cycle. Or you put the shower on and there's no water. And you turn the sink on and there's no water. And there's plenty of water in this country. The dude is fucking nuts. He's nuts.
That doesn't even make any sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense. And I I read an article probably about a month and a half ago, talking about, and this was at the beginning when his numbers were just starting to slide, because way before it got to where we are now, and it made the point that yes, he constantly flags his base because, again, he's not that bright, and he's running. So before, when he was running a campaign, he was the outsider. So he just beat on the get the base, because that's how he won. He got showed up. And the left wasn't quite as animated, people didn't show up in certain states, and he won. So the thing is that he's done nothing to build a coalition since. All he ever does is try to stroke his base, because you know, because they make him feel good. That's why, again, why it's all about him. They make him feel good. They cheer him, and he can't. And, you know, the other day he talked about ratings, not about what the actual state of the economy or the state of the virus was. His ratings. That's all he gives a fuck about. So and so his base give him ratings, and so he loves that. So he keeps stroking it. And that's why his numbers are going down, because he does these briefings. And people are watching it like a train wreck. Like, what the fuck is this dude talking about? He doesn't know what he's doing. And as the more he talks, his numbers go down and down. Because what ends up happening is, to your point before, because not everybody who followed him was a fascist. The people who aren't okay with fascism, there's kind of a lot of people don't really follow politics. They're kind of mindless to it. They kind of see a few images and they decide something and they vote. So the ones that don't pay attention, all of a sudden start seeing this guy spout complete and utter nonsense on a daily basis.
Flush the toilet and it doesn't go down. There's not enough water.
And so
the ones because there's no water.
Who are not fascists, who go, I supported this guy. This guy's a fucking, you know, he's a loon. And so they've been backing away slowly. And even now you're starting to see some Republicans behind the scenes are starting to say, well, I was never really with him, because they know he's playing. They know that unless something changes, unless he'd be able to basically,
like, this boat is sinking, and they are.
Yeah, and also know if they're connected to him, they're screwed. They're home.
Bilge rats that are casting themselves overboard from a flaming ship as fast as possible.
He's heading for a historical defeat. So they're already setting up the pretext to say that, oh, well, you know, Tracy Harris posted an article yesterday before where basically they were saying, well, we wanted to oppose Trump, but we couldn't, basically because they would lose their job. It's like, wow, what kind, you know, you're such a patriot that you put your job over the country. But they're basically setting that pretext up to say, well, we could, you know, yes, he was doing horrible things. We weren't really with him. We just couldn't stop him because they don't want to later.
There's a weird thing that people do, and not everyone does this, but it's pretty common. Most people, I think, do this or have experienced it. When you make a mistake, you don't really like to admit that you made a mistake, and you defend that mistake. And I think a lot of the Trump support we've seen, obviously not all of it. There are people that love the shit out of him, but some of the support that we've seen for him that is now dwindling are those people. Those people who could not admit that they fucked up so bad. And they spent the last couple of years defending the shit out of really stupid things. But now it's getting so stupid that they're saying, yeah, no, I can't defend this anymore.
Well, and the evidence of that, the biggest evidence of that is the convention. Because if you remember, initially, he was
what happened with that, actually?
Yeah, so North Carolina said, look, you can't have you if you're going to do your convention, you're going to have to follow some rules. You're going to have to follow our social distancing. So you can only have to have like one person every 3 seats, and everyone's going to have to wear masks. So he did the balls out thing. Oh, I'm going to be tough, and I'm going to tell them, well, if you don't let us do that, we're going to go somewhere else. So of course that was impractical because you can't move that entire operation in 2 months.
But I thought they did. I thought they moved it to Florida.
Well, part of it, only part of it.
Oh, okay.
So they moved part of it to Florida, but now, of course, Florida's blowing up, and they're actually worse than New York was at its height.
Oh my God! What a shock! After they did things like let everybody go to the beach on spring break because no COVID, it's a conspiracy.
Exactly. So now that everyone in Florida is getting sick, they had to actually cancel that part, and so so now again, there's big egg on his face because and so now, of course, and funny. Now Trump is actually starting to promote masks, and they said that it went from somewhere in the 20% range where only 20% of Republicans were in favor of masks. Now that he said they should wear masks, 58% say they should wear masks. I mean, it's
wow.
Wow. Whoo-wee. Man, he needs to be paying somebody for that.
Yeah. So Tuesday, masks were evil, and Wednesday they suddenly became good.
Yeah.
That's how you get masks political. That's how masks become political, right there.
We'll see how much good that does in the long run. I just wanted to interrupt with breaking news because I know, Kazum, you're quite familiar with the Seattle area, as Sister Danger is as well. And there's apparently a lot of violence kicking off right now in Seattle. I don't know what the end result of that, if it's ended yet, but I was just informed of it while I was off camera. So I'm not very pleased to say so, and I don't know what the extent of that is, but I thought those of you with an interest might like to look into it whilst we still continue to discuss whatever we discuss. And I'm going to let Michael back on.
As of 4 p.m. and change, the protest in Seattle has been declared a riot. The police have pushed back the protesters twice and then retreated. They did so using flashbangs, tear gas, which until yesterday was supposed to be banned, and pepper spray. They have been deliberately targeting media and have done some things such as spraying a protester directly in the eyes with pepper spray at point blank range. She didn't have goggles and she got an orange stripe across her eyes. Smacking streamers to the ground, as in live streamers to the ground, and trying to knock phones out of their hands, hitting people on the ground with their bites, etc. Here are some of the feds. So this is actually what I'm reading to you here is a description that is coming from a live streamer. It looks like the name is Joey Weezer, Wieser, and it's on.
You get the best news from a man named Weezer.
Actually, Weezer, Idaho is a place that we used to go on for Harley Davidson runs. We go out there to the Fiddle Festival. Good times. A little bit crazy, but good times.
I'll tell you what, if you want to get some good live coverage, go to a YouTube channel called Unicorn Riot.
And this looks like it's downtown on, well, it's on Pine, it looks like. I'm trying to catch the street sign here in the corner. Oh, ow, that's loud.
Well, as near as I can tell, it said that the crowd lit fires. It doesn't say where they lit fires. I mean, that could be little cisterns in the middle of the street, or it could be burning a building down. I can't tell the difference, right? It doesn't say.
You know where else you can get coverage too would be on Twitch. There's a couple channels that I know of, and I'll see if I can find them that's been doing a lot of live streaming from the protest.
I'll put this in the comments if you want to. It's kind of a long link, so I don't know if you'll actually want to share it. But if you do,
okay.
Let me just put this in the private chat real quick.
One thing here is saying that a Starbucks was set on fire. So now I don't know if that's the case or not. That's just one. It's Jason Rants on Twitter, but he seems predisposed to not like the protest. So I don't know if that's true or not.
But there are worse things that could have been set up.
Well, and the thing is that okay, let's
that's like my religion, man. Java is my god. I'm offended.
I love coffee. I just don't like Starbucks.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm with you there too. I don't care for Starbucks sandwich either. I agree. Yeah, we're gonna have to look for that. But I know Unicorn Riot. That's a YouTube channel that does a lot of live feeds. There is, I'm trying to think offhand. There's a channel on Twitch called Woke that I know of. I'll see what links I can find and I'll put them in the private chat.
Now here's I see another one here says roving band breaks into Seattle businesses setting fires and looting. Okay, so now I don't know who they are. Obviously, I want them to be arrested. But again, should everybody get basically cleared out and gassed and all that because that group is doing that thing?
Well, so one of the
how do you separate them?
Well, an interesting thing
ones that are standing there protesting, you don't arrest, and the ones that are.
That's fair, yeah.
True. Yeah, it makes sense.
I mean, it's an easy distinction.
Well, so I don't know. I feel like I want to say a couple of things, but I'm not sure. But about the attacking the businesses, I can't remember if it's Seattle or Portland. I was just reading up. I know that recently a couple of businesses, I want to say it was in Seattle that this happened, that were attacked and vandalized, and they were targeted incidences. At first, I was just like, why are people just attacking some crap? They weren't actually just attacking crap. The owner of one of them, at least, was a Seattle police officer that had been involved in something that was some manner of not good thing here in Seattle that had happened. And the owner of the other one of them was a well-known maybe real estate person here in Seattle that is a known bigot, and it goes into poor Black communities here buys up stuff and then gentrifies it, and then of course jacks up rents and whatnot. So I know that at least recently in the news there were 2 things that were vandalized. It was definitely blamed in the news as like rioters going crazy, but they were targeted. And so I feel super divided on that, because I'm like, okay, well, I guess that means yay, good. It's not just crazy rioters doing random stuff. That's good, but it's and maybe I'd like to see some kind of what do you call it, vigilante justice, I guess, towards people that are terrible people. But at the same, I mean, as much as that feels good, it's not the right thing, and it's somewhat scary to think that even if that vigilante justice seems like it's been a while in coming or whatever, targeted attacks are scary, and targeted attacks on a business are one step closer to targeted attacks on people's homes and innocent kids, innocent spouses, whatever. So I don't know.
I have to real quick. I have to comment on this. I am now officially the Democratic nominee for freeholder in my county. Freeholder is basically county commissioner. So I am now.
Congratulations!
It was made official today. The votes were certified. So I am officially the Democrat that's running for county commissioner in my county. So I cannot on the air say I support the idea of vigilante justice.
Oh, fun! I get the fun stuff.
So if you want me to say I support vigilante justice, we'll have to do it when it's no longer live.
Nah, I think that as much as I feel like there are things and problems, I am ultimately at heart, I am a person, when I say things like I want to see these protests continue or whatever, at heart, I am a person of the law. I like the law. I believe in the law. I believe that it's critical to society, to the progression of society and whatnot. So ultimately, like I say, as much as vigilante justice, like it feels good right in the moment, like to see somebody getting what for, it is not the right thing. It is not the right thing to do. And,
and I want to be clear on that too. I am definitely, I'm for civilization and I'm anti-anarchy. I don't care whether it's left-wing anarchy, right-wing anarchy. I'm anti-anarchy. I think people who are anarchists are at a certain level are leeches, and I'm against that. But the thing is, so I guess for me, I see riots not as something I look in favor of, but I do see some of them. Do see them as predictable based on circumstance.
Yeah.
Now, the thing to me that I find ironic in whole deal, the conversation we're having about basically all the protesters getting lumped in with the violent people, is as a black person, this is literally what I go through all the fucking time. And every time I hear the whole thing, the people do the "What about Chicago?" I took a friend of mine, one of her friends did the "What about Chicago?" thing, and I just tore I'm pretty cagey up people's friends because they're friends, and I try to respect people's spaces, but I just tore them a new one, and actually she thumbed me up, so that was cool, because I got so incensed with it, because it's that idea that, well, people that are superficially like you did something bad, so what happens to you is of no consequence. And that's the other problem, and again, another predictable reason why some of the violence happens is because basically, whenever some people were protesting, and again, there were mostly peaceful protesters and small number of rioters and looters. So, but the police used the same tactics on all of them. So basically, in the public's mind is, well, some people did something wrong. You're all in the same place. So literally the fact that, people did something wrong, so the police can do anything they want, which is how we got here in the first place.
Yes.
Because we give the police way too much latitude. We forgive way too much. And,
Yes.
and even with qualified immunity, there are ways to violate qualified immunity. You would lose it, but it's written so strictly that it almost never happens. And so we've had this idea, and the same thing with the prison system. The prison system's fucked up, but that should also be part of this whole conversation. But basically, people have the attitude that if you committed a crime, I don't care if you armed robbery in a bank. I don't care if you raped 15 people or you stole a loaf of bread and and that happened to be a felony where you live and you got thrown in jail. They don't give a shit about you. There's no degree. They don't look at the
it's all lumped.
It's all lumped together.
Nuance. There's no nuance.
It's sort of a zero tolerance policy on things.
Exactly, and I always call that zero intelligence, because the petty thief definitely should not get treated the same way as the armed robber or the rapist or the murderer. And that's what Eric Garner. Think about Eric Garner a few years back in New York. He got choked out. And what do people say? Oh, he was breaking the law. His horrible crime was selling loose cigarettes, and the fucking man is dead. And people were like, he resisted arrest, and his resisting arrest was literally putting his arms like this, so it was harder for the cops to try to put him in cuffs. And they were perfectly fine with him being choked out on the street. And that's another big part of the problem, is that people don't differentiate between the gradations of offenses and what's offensive or not, and who's doing something and who's not.
Since it was police killing George Floyd was basically the sparking point for everything that we're seeing now. That it's wrong for the police to even kill the guilty ones, right? I mean,
yes.
Right? I mean, they're not even supposed to kill the guilty. They're not supposed to kill any of them.
Well, so this harkens back to what I was saying way at the beginning of the show, which is there is a different what?
DoorDash.
Oh, shit, you there it is. No. What I was saying about how there are different levels of there are different standards of responsibility that are on these different players on both sides. So when somebody's like, well, this person did this terrible thing to a police officer, and therefore it's okay that police officer over there did this similar thing to a protester. But no, it isn't, because the standard of responsibility and legal, like your legal ramifications and requirements that you've taken on yourself as a representative and agent of what is supposed to be our law, hold you to a higher level than the common citizen. It doesn't make it any more right for them to do the thing. What it means is when the thing happens, it is with greater gravitas on the side of the person that is supposed to be representing an unbiased deliverance of the law. Right. That's what they're supposed to be doing, is only upholding the law, and they're supposed to be doing it as fair and equal as a human being can. According to whatever it is that they've, specifically sworn in their statements and swearings and whatever.
Yeah. If I may, just briefly, I absolutely agree that cops, and for that matter, politicians, should be held to a higher standard than citizens, because politicians make the laws and cops enforce the laws. So it stands to reason that they should be held to a higher standard. However, because of qualified immunity, the opposite is true in reality.
Yes.
They're held to a lower standard than we are. So as far as I'm concerned, if we can get it so that they're held to the same standard as civilians, I'll call that a victory, and therefore there's no way they can complain, because they're not either being advantaged or disadvantaged if everybody's equal. And I kind of think that equality is one of the common themes that runs through the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. So if you err towards equality, I think we're probably on the winning side of history.
Well, in fact, for that matter, to me, I think the standard should be, at least for cops, they should at least have to follow the same standard that soldiers in warfare do. I mean, because they're actually at war, and there's actually armed enemies that they know are there to kill them. So if a soldier couldn't do something and get away with it, then why the fuck does the police? Because otherwise, then we're saying that the cops are at war with the citizens. And even if the cops are at war with the citizens, they should have to at least follow the conventions of war at that minimum.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's possible to have a modern society, especially a society as large as ours, without law enforcement of some sort. I mean, it's a given in a country this size. You know, we're not going to have some kind of anarchist paradise. It's just it wouldn't work. It just could never work. Way too many people. Way too complex.
Anarchy is an impossible state anyway. I mean, that's like
Well,
a.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Sorry.
they can-
Because a hierarchy will form no matter
no
what.
matter what, no matter what,
Yeah.
you'll always have the top dog or whatever.
order out of chaos. But you know, having said that, that we need law enforcement because we need law enforcement. They do hold an elevated position in our society, and I don't have a problem with that. They kind of should have an elevated position in our society, but yeah, they need to have. They need to be held responsible. They need to be held to a higher standard because of that higher.
Well, it's not
higher
just
elevation.
because they hold. It's not just because they hold that though. They don't just hold it. They don't just hold it in a vacuum. They hold that power as a representative of us, the common citizen, giving up our personal right to say, if somebody comes and attacks me, I have agreed as a part of my social contract, right, that I can't just march over to their house and shoot them in the head because they came and, or go shoot their dog because they came and shot my dog, right? They did an illegal thing as a upstanding citizen, right, that is upholding the law. Then it is my part to then turn them in. I give up my right to defend my own self personally with my whatever ability I may have. I give that to the government in exchange for protection as the same protection of the law that everybody has. So they're not just getting that, right? This is why we hold them to a higher standard, because that without the law, that's what I would get to do, right? If we lived in the law of the jungle, that's what that would mean, is that if you come and attack me, I will take your head off with everything I can, and that's my right to do it because I get to defend my own living situation. But when I cede that to another person, I only cede that to them with the understanding that they're going to do my protecting now, right? So we must hold them to a higher standard because that's the responsibility they now get. And this is this contract that I feel like is very broken at this point. And that's why we're seeing the things happen that are.
For many, many years.
And I mean, I would love to see things like, so I had a friend who made a post, I don't know, maybe like a week ago or so on Facebook. It was kind of an interesting thing where what they had done was they had gone through and they had counted up the number of approximate hours that it takes for people to have, say, some of the most common jobs. So like they started with somebody who's like a doctor, right? And so in order to get a PhD, you basically have to put in, say like 100,000 hours worth of man time in study in college. You have to have X amount of degrees. You have to, of course, have your associates, your bachelor's, your master's, then you get your doctor's, right? And you put in, X amount of hours. Maybe it's 10,000, not 100,000. I could be wrong, whatever. They had just gone through and they were like, well, this is how many approximately human hours and levels of education that are required to like be a doctor, to be a lawyer, to be a fireman, to be, just the most just common stuff, to be a dentist, right? And at the very bottom of that list was cops. Literally the least required level of education, level of actual training hours involved to become a cop, less than being in the military. Well, and I'm like, and we give those guys guns. Like, what?
It's less than being a bartender. You have to attend, like, in New Jersey, it's either 20 or 28 hours of class training and get a certificate. You take a test and pass it to get a certificate to be a bartender.
I think like masseuse and hair person were on, like a hairdresser were on that list, and they required more training than you have to have in order to become a cop. It was crazy.
Another thing too is police like to say that their job is so dangerous, but it's actually somewhat low on the list when you compare it to a number of other types of jobs.
So. Yeah, that's actually true.
Electrician is more dangerous.
Electrician, Yeah,
Pizza delivery is more dangerous.
I actually went and figured out that the mortality rate on the per capita mortality rate for electrician is 3 to 4 times higher than it is for an officer. And
did you say a mortician or an electrician?
Electrician.
Okay.
The thing is, what's weird about it is, now look,
Something felt dead on that.
And I said before, if you're a cop in Jersey City, if you're a cop in Newark, if you're a cop in Camden, yeah, you have a rough beat, and you're gonna see some shit, and you could be in peril. If you're a cop in Woodbridge, New Jersey, not so much. And so that's the problem, though, is we basically treat all their, because we kind of look at the worst of their circumstances and act like they all face that, and it's bullshit.
Yes. That is actually a fair point. I had not really thought of that, but that's true.
So to me, I'd actually give a cop in Camden a little more latitude because he's dealing with a lot of bad dudes, versus Glenridge, New Jersey, which is like a cop's dream. Like, you don't even get domestic disturbance. It's usually like people speeding.
Sparta, New Jersey cop.
Yeah, drinking in public. That's the limit of what you're dealing with. Karen, and it's mostly Karens who are screaming at you because they don't want to get ticketed because they got pulled over for going 35 in the 25 zone. That's what you're going to face. But
Joe, a cop in Alpine, New Jersey.
Oh God. For those who don't know, Alpine, New Jersey is one of the most wealthiest communities in the country. It's where Chris Rock, Jay-Z, Mary J. Blige live. Eddie Murphy.
That's basically where I need to go party. I mean, that sounds...
I would love to be a cop in Alpine, New Jersey.
Oh my God.
That's the best job ever.
It would be a dream. Well, I think I told before how my cousin Vance, who was a security guard in Camden, and he wanted to be a cop in my hometown. It's the town in Middlesex County. Again, very, very low crime. One cop shot in a 50-year period, and she was deathly afraid that he was going to get shot. And meanwhile, he was a security guard in Camden. There's shootouts like on a regular basis across, because there's drug gangs on the streets, and there's shootouts going on. The bank across the street got robbed like once a month. But she was okay with him doing that, and she was petrified of him being a cop in their hometown. This was ridiculous.
Can I ask you guys a question? I mean, is that okay? Is anybody?
Sure.
Okay. I just don't want to cut anybody off if they wanted to comment on this. What do you guys think about the recent speech from Cortez? I can't say her name very well. You know who I'm talking about?
Yes, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah. Yes. ACS, ASC,
AOC.
Thank you. What do you guys think about her recent speech there on the floor?
She was brilliant.
Yeah.
I haven't heard it yet.
I've been critical of her in many ways, but I think it was brilliant, and she's come a long way from her first kind of shaky days when she first got in the house. So I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I can't say that I much think that some of her ideas, at least as they started out, are exactly the most probable thing. Really,
what do you think might be a little off about what she wants to do?
Well, so I want to first preface, I want to qualify what I'm about to say with, I'm not super up to date or remember much about her policies when she all became a thing. One of the big ones I remember was about education, and being like a proponent of like, just make education free. And she put forth some kind of legislation related to that. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I would love for there to be free education, because if I had my way, I could just sit around and go to school for the rest of my life. I love academia. But I also don't think that's exactly the most practical way to approach that. So I was like, well,
okay, I have to jump in because I want to get back to the original question, Sister Dana, that you actually opened with what did you people think about what she said on the floor?
Yes, because I super liked
either yesterday or the day before. I can't remember what day it was, yesterday or the day before.
I think it was the day before.
Yeah, I listened to her entire speech, and I listened to some of the other subsequent speakers afterwards. I also listened to his apology, which I have to agree was a non-apology. If one of my children made that...
Oh, hey, wait. Someone's asking in the audience what we're referring to.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Or let the chat sort it out themselves for a second, because I just want to carry on. But I mean, like, Mr. Yoho's apology in quotation marks was such a non-apology. If my child tried that apology on their sibling, I would not accept that. I would make them apologize over again. I mean, that's how bad it was as far as I'm concerned. And AOC was completely correct, in my opinion, to point out that you can't hide behind the fact that you have a wife or daughters to say that you therefore must respect women. Because there's almost every man I know who has a wife and daughters has at some point disrespected women.
Yeah.
There you go.
You know, whether that's their habit or not, it varies from person to person. But I mean, you know, I've done stupid shit in my life, and I'm a pretty decent guy. So if I've done stupid shit, God knows how many people have done it.
Well,
Absolutely. It's like when someone says, "Well, I couldn't be racist. I have a black friend," you know.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, I just think that it's I don't know. The thing is that the main thing for me, Sister Danger, that I really think Mr. Yoho, I can't remember his first name. Mr. Yoho said that knowing there were press right there. People are accusing AOC of using this to elevate her profile and to further her agenda. What do you think he did it for in the first place? He knew the fucking media was right there. You never heard of Mr. Yoho before today or yesterday, did you?
No.
True.
Well, I did, because I know somebody who literally ran against him a few years ago.
Fair enough. You're further ahead than I was, because I never heard of the bastard till day before yesterday. You know what I mean? So, and I think you know, when someone has an already high profile like AOC, he's a great target for that. Once upon a time, 30 years ago, all you had to do is he's pictured next to Madonna, and you were famous, right? There are certain people or attach yourself to that will advance your career. And people make a calculated decision. People like Candace Owens have decided to attack certain people to advance her career, and certain causes to advance her career. I actually don't believe that people like her believe the things that she says. I think she is a shill for an agenda, you know? And I think there's a lot of people that do that. And Mr. Yoho, I think, is an example of a person who is using someone else as a vehicle for his own advancement. That's my personal opinion.
You made me.
Please discuss. I'm going to let Michael back on.
You reminded me of there's a YouTuber who, well, I may remain nameless, but early in his YouTube career, literally came out and said, because he was doing some stuff and people were, first he built up a bit of an audience, and then he kind of upset a few people with some things he said, and he flat out came out here, "I'm here to build my brand." And then he went off and did his own thing and built up a big following, and then continued to say dumber and dumber things. And I'm sure, again, it was because that was what could get him the most money, the most most views, and so yeah, people do that shit all the time.
Dusty?
Yes, yes, you're exactly right.
Oh my God, I remember.
It sounded familiar. I
remember that guy. Oh, I remember all of that. Now that there's a name on it, I'm like, do I know who this is? Yes, I do.
Too. I remember hearing that.
What happened to that dude, man?
I will give him credit. At least he was honest, because there's so many who do it and just pretend that they don't. He was flat out, "I'm here to make money and I'm here to promote my brand. So fuck it, I'm going to say whatever." I'd actually followed him up to that point, and then I was like, "Oh no, I'm not up for that shit," and I moved on.
Well, the reason I kind of brought it up is because I don't remember if it was right before we went live or not, but Goth was saying, I think it was right when I came in, right before we went live, and so I was just listening to like the tail end of you guys talking about whatever your topic was, and he made this comment of, "I think it opens the door for X others' behavior," right? And I have no clue what you guys were talking about, because I wasn't privy to the conversation, but I guess that like that is one of the things that I liked so much about her, what she was saying, is because she said, she basically said, "I am here to stand up and say, this behavior is not okay, because this behavior from this type of person in this role that sets an example opens the door for other people to do the same type of thing." And I thought it was just so important. I mean, I've tried to make this point. My dad actually, I mean, you guys know, I think I've talked about my dad before, how he's pretty much right-wing Fox News, and I am not. And he has recently unfriended me on Facebook and is not talking to me right now, because because Trump, I guess, but I actually had tried to talk to him about this when the first round of Trump voting came out. I was like, the thing is that you're supporting somebody in a position who outwardly says, outwardly make jokes about abusive behavior towards other people. And
grab him by the pussy.
Yeah, and that makes it okay for other people to think that they can do it. And to me, this is one of the huge things that just stacks right up there with all the other issues. But this is such a big one to me, bigger than some of the others, because the danger in this is that some people know that when they observe that, right, they know that they see what's happening. They're like, this opens the door for me to be able to do this. And I get that. But people with lesser moral compasses, they don't see any problem with that. And I was thinking quite heavily on this today because a friend of mine had made a Facebook post talking about it. I was like, it is very difficult. I think there are whole segments of our society. I grew up in one where in my household, winning an argument was who could yell the loudest and get off the most ranks, who could make the most insults and call names to one another the most efficiently, who was the meanest and the wittiest. That was how we won arguments. To this day, my dad and my mom both will still call me names if they get mad enough at me. My dad is like, "Oh, keep drinking the Kool-Aid, you dumb kid." I mean, they don't call me horrible names, but they will say things like, "Well, you're just, an idiot about this topic," or, and then like in the next phrase, they'll be like, "You're such a know-it-all." Like, I mean, so things like that. That is what I grew up with, and it's certainly what I grew up with. My dad is a biker. And so for years and years, I mean, I have lots of history in the Harley Davidson community. And I can guarantee you that amongst people like that, it is very gaslighting, even if they don't know that they're doing it. Because what they do is they'll say things, and I mean, pardon my French, but they'll be like, "Yeah, like, don't mess with that chick. She's a badass bitch," right? But in that phrase, they're still calling you a bitch. And there is no connotation of that word anywhere that is a good one. Even if at the time they're calling you, like she will just mess you up, right? Like, even if they're lauding you, the way that they're lauding you is with a pejorative, ultimately, at its core. But it's presented in that way, and it's so gaslighty. And when you are raised to think that I can take it, I can hear those things that you are saying to me, and I could just be like, whatever, you don't touch me, you don't hurt me, you don't anything to me, right? Therefore, whatever. That is this attitude that, that might be true. Maybe it doesn't hurt you to do, but that also doesn't make it right for them to do that. And I was lucky, I think, in my life to get out of that, because to separate myself from this viewpoint, because I had very early on in my life terrible boyfriend relationships. And when I got out of those, I just literally made the decision for myself, nobody else involved in it, no parents, no nothing. I was just like, you know what? I did not like how I was treated. I will refuse to accept that treatment for myself again. And I just set my own standard, and then I stuck to that. And then over time, I learned a lot more about the ethics, the philosophy, the things that are going on behind that, right? But if I hadn't made those decisions, just decided, hey, you know what? I don't want to date somebody who's going to swear at me anymore. Screw them. If I hadn't just made that decision, I I'd probably still be doing that. I'd probably still be just in that cycle of things, because you get told, you get applauded for being tough. And the thing is that you're not being tough. You're being taught to accept abuse upon yourself, whatever that may be, and I think it's really hard to differentiate those two. You have to see a different way of life. You have to meet different people that don't do that before you begin to have a basis of comparison. It's hard.
You have to order from DoorDash.
Well, and that's to me one of the
You gotta
one problem. What worried me from the get-go about Trump was that, again, I know people who kind of heard this, the grab him by the pussy and all that, and kind of looked the other way. They wanted to put it aside, but I knew I suspected, and it's even worse than I suspected, to be quite honest. But because basically, when you have the most powerful person in the United States, if not in the entire world,
yes,
when they speak a certain way and that's considered acceptable, then it does open up in society. It does make, at least within a large segment of the population. And that's the reason why, when you see the fact that, bias attacks have gone up and all these different things, is because it's not that, again, people always say, and it's true, Trump's not the cause, he's the symptom. However, all this was staying below the surface because it was not socially acceptable.
That's right. That is absolutely right.
And so what Trump has done is he's made it for a large segment of the population to make it okay, proper, even to bring this out into the light. And so people are opening up, and that's actually why they like him so much, because the people who wanted to call people different, invectives and didn't feel like they could get away with it, they feel liberated because now I say this and I can say that and I can do this and I can do that and I can get away with, because what are you going to say to me? The president of the United States does it. And
we all
esteem. That's a position of esteem. So if they can say it, certainly should be okay for me.
I mean, we all need some sort of filters in order to get along. We have to have filters.
True.
And Trump not having filters encourages everyone on all sides to not have filters. And we can see how that's gone.
Oh, yes.
I mean, we were talking about police brutality. I mean, it has gotten worse. It's always been an issue. It's been with us like forever, but it's gotten worse since he was elected. Because you got to remember, he actually even said outright, when you're arresting these guys, don't be gentle with them. Smack their head up against the top of the
remember when he was running for president and he was like, go ahead, punch that dude in the face. I'll pay for your legal fees.
When the president of the United States is advocating for brutality by the police, you're going to get it. It's going to manifest somewhere.
In his acceptance speech, when he got the Republican nomination, he did this big "I will be the law and order president." He was
I remember that
far back. That was his main thing. And I want to make this distinction, which between what Sister Danger said something earlier about how important the law is, which I totally agree with. In a democracy, you have to have the rule of law as the top, at the top of the structure. The social contract has to be dependent on the rule of law, and the rule of law, ideally, in a just society, would be equally applied to all. But there's a difference in the connotation between the rule of law and the term law and order. Okay, law and order means law to create order, and if there's no order, you're breaking the law, right? So it is a completely different emphasis, and law and order is always something that is invoked by authoritarian regimes around the world throughout history. It's a law and order. Putting down protest, dissent goes back centuries, and it's necessary to hold on to power. That's the only way people have held on to power. Despotism, unfortunately, is the most common form of government throughout history. So,
did you say despotism?
Yeah, despotism.
Oh, okay.
Which can be fascistic, or it can be. I mean, you could argue that monarchies are fascistic, but I think feudalism and monarchy is slightly different than fascism, although the end result might be the same in terms of the oppression of the poor and the concentration of wealth between the very few and all that kind of thing. But that's another conversation.
Yeah, fair. It is fair. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that I just I really had liked her speech if literally for no other reason than a person was saying out loud, this behavior is unacceptable and I refuse to pretend that it is. And I refuse to just hear, oh, I did a thing. I thought her point about actually just because you have a wife and a daughter doesn't make you a good person. I thought that was actually a pretty good point too. I thought she had a lot of good points actually, but I don't know. I guess it like the more that I noodle on it here, like over the last couple of days, the more it just kind of becomes so incredible to me. I have to ask myself sometimes. I think about this whole, well, if this person did it, then that means it's okay for me to do too. And I just think to myself, even if you could do that thing. Even if you could, like, which of course you can, people can come on here and call me or anybody else all kinds of names that they want to, right? Why would you want to? Why would you want? What kind of a person at their core wants to purposefully inflict pain and hurt and harm on another person?
There are people who unfortunately it's very common. Particularly people who have
Agent of Doubts down there, like, hold on, I talked to these people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing is people who have been hurt. Like I've said in past, gatherings that a lot of people who follow Trump, they feel that they've been put down, and the thing is, they're not wrong. They're just wrong about the source of who's putting them down. So people who have felt pain, who have felt marginalized, and they want to strike at somebody, anybody, they don't really care. And that's a big part of the problem with criminal justice in the United States in general. You think about like the death penalty. The reason why I oppose the death penalty isn't that that it would always be immoral for the state to put somebody down. For me, it's just the fact that we can get it wrong, and we know we have gotten it wrong, the peril of executing someone who's innocent, the damage that does to society, to me, is worse than any perceived damage of not executing somebody.
Sure, it is better to let 10 guilty men go free than to execute one innocent person.
Right, it's irreversible. But in this case, you kill, it's irreversible. So, but the thing is, and the reason why a lot of people even want the death penalty, again, it's a revenge thing. People have been hurt, and unfortunately, they don't really care that we've actually got the right person. They just want somebody to be held accountable. Whether it's a very scapegoaty thing, and you figure it makes sense. A country where people are predominantly of the Abrahamic religions that have that whole notion of scapegoating. We'll pile our sins on this person and we'll kill them, and it doesn't matter if they did it or not. We feel better because we expunged the sin of whatever happened. But to Paul's point about despots, this is the thing, and I think about this a lot. What is the most troubling to me about despots, I mean, everything is troubling, but particularly, they do all this harmful thing to their people. And the weird part about it is, because and of course they do it because they want to hold power. They don't want their power threatened, and they think that, well, I'm going to maintain power through crushing my adversaries. But all that ever does is make more adversaries, and that if they actually treated their people decently, they could be dictator for life. Because if people are happy, they don't want to rock the boat. But and they should all learn that line from Jakar, from Babylon 5. No dictator, no invader has ever held a people captive by force of arms forever. But they never learn. And if in like North Korea, eventually that regime is going to collapse. It keeps heading more and more toward that. It can't last forever. But if they actually helped their people and spent money to develop the country, everyone would love the leaders and legitimately, and they wouldn't have to lie about it. And they could be the leader for life if they wanted to be.
Joe, I think I can get us a little bit closer to finishing on DoorDash, but not all the way like a complete segue. But what I want to see in like the annals of history after Trump is deposed is this to be about the George Floyd protests, or this about the We Are Women protests that happened for 3 years in a row before that.
Yeah.
That were the largest protests I ever saw. Right? I would love for it to be about that, but my fear is what I'm seeing is he's going to be able to blame the pandemic. And a large number of people are just going to chalk it up to, well, the economy tanked because of the pandemic. He would have still been the president if the economy did good, because that graph of rich people's feelings that is the stock market is going to crash when kids can't get sent back to school and people can't get back to work, and rich people realize this. And that's going to happen so close to the election. They're just going to blame it on the economy because of the pandemic. And what I want, really, is for people to remember that this sexism thing and this racism thing was a really big thing for all of these years that I could not get away from. But I fear that history is just going to mark it down as economy tanked, nobody liked him.
Michael, I don't care how history records Trump's downfall. I don't care. As long as, once he's out of office, the state of New York prosecutes him to the fucking teeth.
See, he's going to get out of it. He's going to. Here's my prediction, right? Like I said an hour ago or whatever. He's seeding the press already with like all these crazy notions on purpose. Yeah, and then after he loses the election, if he decides to concede the election, if they come after him, he'll claim cognitive impairment, and then he'll say the Democrats have been saying this for years.
Oh, if they could get him on something related to
me I'm not cognitively impaired when you've been telling me for 3 years that I am. You know, come on. That's what.
I mean, that won't work in New York, and they want him real bad. It won't work in New York, and I mean, he just spent the last 3 days proving, you know, person, woman, man, camera, TV.
That's part of my whole seeding this crazy thing, though. He's seeding this notion that he's a little, because that's self-evidently loopy. That you're bragging about that is self-evidently loopy.
How can this even be a thing, though? Because he doesn't even write what he says. I mean, he reads a teleprompter. He doesn't write his own speeches? They have speech writers. He probably doesn't. I mean, when he's like, I didn't know that any of this was like previously quoted by, you know, white supremacists back in the 1960s. What, you know, what about Juneteenth or whatever? Like, you know, like.
Yeah, no one ever heard of Juneteenth before
he
Trump.
Probably himself literally knows nothing about that because he's an absolute moron. He didn't even get into college legit. He didn't graduate legit. Like, nothing.
Well,
he's an idiot. He's a real idiot. But somebody's writing that for him.
Well, as Doug said last week, well, the thing is, I do care about how he goes down in history because I think it will matter to the long-term survival and reparation of the nation. However, I think in the short term, Michael, I think you may be right, but in the long term, I'm not too worried long term where things will end up. That when things are written. That will be in there. I think and certainly the Republicans, that's what the excuse they will use. Oh, it's just because of the economy and it wasn't for anything else.
Let's talk about that for a second, Joe, because I mean, it seems to me that Trump is a sinking ship right now, and you know, ignoring all the violence that's going on everywhere, everything like that, just for a second, the GOP must be shitting their pants right now.
Oh, absolutely.
His coattails aren't really going anywhere but down. They're in quicksand. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And it's wrong to be like obviously complacent, and everybody still has to vote like their lives and their rights depend on it because they might. You know what I mean? Especially if he puts troops in American cities and there's no exit strategy for that. Because mark my words, No one's talking about this on the media. I've not heard one person say, so what conditions have to exist for these people to go home? You know? And
You don't need an exit
strategy, then they're not going to exit.
You don't need an exit strategy for troops in American cities. The exit strategy is go home. Just go home.
Yeah,
but this is what I'm saying. How many nights of people going home and staying home and not protesting will it take to get to those shock troops to go out of Portland? Just Portland. Forget about the other cities.
I mean, we already know how to make the protest stop. We already know how to do that. I mean, it's not like it's a mystery.
Well, I think the real point though that Gotha is driving at is that they're here, and now that they've had an excuse to get here, we are looking at there will not be an extraction, and no matter what people come up with to say, it'll be like, oh, well, first we have to protect from protesters and rioters, and then we have to stay on federal property because we're just going to ensure that it doesn't hype up again, and then we have to stay here because now we're going to help rebuild the damaged property, and then we have to do this, and it's just going to keep going and going and going.
Further and further
like,
and further.
I mean, they literally didn't have to have protests as a reason to come here. They can actually just come here no matter what. They don't, I mean, there's nothing that legally binds them to have to coordinate that with any of the local authorities, but it's pretty unprecedented that they don't. So,
right. If I may jump in, the whole thing about on what conditions they will go back. Trump has been saying he's got 50 or 60 or 70,000 troops he can scatter around the country. And the thing about Portland is he says, oh, you know, we can fix things in Chicago. It will be very fast. It will be very fast.
Yeah, well, when you mow people down like in Tiananmen Square, it's pretty fucking fast.
Yeah, well, they've been in Portland. They've been in Portland for 3 weeks, and they're not done yet. So how fast is fast, Trump? How fast is fast? And this brings me back to what conditions? What conditions? Someone's going to get shot.
Yep.
That's what's going to happen.
Yep.
Then either we'll have this big conflagration, or there will be a pulling back, and it could go either way.
Well, here's the thing too about, you know, again, because he blusters and he doesn't actually understand or know anything. That, as I said earlier, because they can't actually intervene on state and local laws, they can only do on federal laws. And so unless somebody gets killed on federal land, like the idea that he's going to go in and do something about the gangs, I guess they have to do, you know, they could do something based on enterprise corruption, but that would be the FBI, not CBP or CBP. CBP. So, you know, basically it's all bluster. They couldn't do anything about the actual problem, the ongoing problem that's been in Chicago, which again is 30th in murders in large cities. So, you know, but why they keep bringing that up, I don't know. Well, I do know because bigotry, because it's easy, because it's the murders are largely happening in the black population. That's why, you know.
No, well, I mean, there's a misconception that Chicago has extremely tight gun laws. It's a misconception. It's not a misconception. It's a lie.
Right.
And because of the violence in Chicago, I mean, and Chicago is a violent city. I mean, there's no way around that. See, your gun laws don't work. That's why it is.
Right. Well, the thing is, the funny thing about it is that they did have tougher gun laws, and federal judge declared unconstitutional. So that hasn't been the case. And actually things got worse after those laws got stripped away. So, which kind of got to, you know, goes to the lie. Just like I've always tell people about Texas, I always want to say, what about Texas? Because Texas has higher, on a per capita basis, Texas has more violent crime than New Jersey. New Jersey has the absolute toughest gun laws in the country, and Texas has the most lax, and yet Texas has the highest violent crime, every single category: murder, rape, arson, fire, you know, carjacking, the worst.
I think it was 9 out of the top 10 states for gun violence. I think 9 out of the 10 were all run by Republicans.
Yeah.
Were they all Texans?
No. But the funny thing is, if you look at the murder rate, the per capita murder rate of the top 10 cities is, again, it's like 8 out of the 10 are red cities, you know, cities in red states and that are largely red. And so this idea that and Alaska is on the list actually because it's got a low population, so it doesn't take that much to make a per capita murder rate be really high. Houston's got a much higher murder rate than Chicago does. But again, the perpetrators aren't generally black, so it doesn't fit the racist narrative that they want to portray. Like Pete had said, earlier, what I usually say, that idea that it's Chicago is all about, black people kill black people, so we shouldn't care if an agent of the state kills them, because they're all basically, we're savages is what it comes down to. So it doesn't matter. I'm a respected business person, engineer, professional, but Tyrone in on South Side, shot Latrell. So therefore, fuck Joe. Fuck Joe's life. The cops can beat Joe up and shoot Joe and step on Joe's neck. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I can't breathe works if you don't want to wear a mask, but not if you want to get that knee off your neck.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Well, the same thing with my body, my choice. That was just fucking infuriating when they started saying that shit. So when women were saying, "Hey, I want some sovereignty over my own body," and who lives in it, then they wouldn't accept my body, choice. But wearing a fucking piece of cloth on their face, all of a sudden, that was a bridge too far.
Behold, as I practice restraint.
Understood. The argument I like to use against the anti-mask people is, they try to say, there's nothing else that they require that we wear in order to go out. I say, you wear clothes, don't you?
So it's funny that you mentioned that, because a couple of weeks ago I was like the whole mask thing, and I basically made this comment on my Facebook post that I wonder how quickly this would suddenly not be a thing anymore if we just went down. We just got a group of huge pagan community, maybe get the naked bikers from Fremont, that do the solstice parade every year, and went down to Olympia, and we just actually started protesting with the people that are out there with their AR-15s that are like, I'm not wearing a mask or whatever because it's infringing my rights, and went balls out nude, except for a mask, right? Because it's legal to do in this state to just be totally nude, and just went out there with signs like, we're not gonna have that, and just see how fast they turn that protest around, because dear God, we can't have boobies and the D out there where everyone can see, right? And then all of my friends in the pagan community were like, what would it take to do this? And I was like, actually, it takes about $75. All we have to do is file a permit to have a thing, and we can just go right on down there, stand in Olympia, right on the courthouse steps, and just protest naked. I was like, I know enough pagans that are willing to get sky-clad for a ritual, so surely they'll just take their clothes off, put on a mask, and woo, right?
Do it.
Are there any laws in Washington about public urination?
Probably about public urination, but certainly it is legal to be fully nude as long as you are not engaging in something that is like an act of solicitation or with intent to provoke. And the same thing is true in Oregon. I think it is actually not true in all of Washington, but it is in Olympia. So in Oregon, the entire state of Oregon, it is legal to be, you can just walk down the street, balls out naked, and right in downtown if you wanted to. And it is perfectly legal as long as you are not doing either of those two things. So if you're not soliciting and you're not with intent to incite. So, yeah.
Why doesn't everybody do that every day? It's summer.
Because boobs are scary. I mean, come on. If you're
people go to horror movies all the time. I don't buy that logic.
I mean,
raise your hand if you think boobs are scary. Put the goddamn hand down.
Well,
There's nothing
feel free
scary
to,
about it.
I'm trying to desensitize myself. Go right ahead and scare me anytime, you know.
I mean, did you guys see the article about the chick that they were calling Athena, who in Portland, like, walked out there just totally buck-ass and naked and just, like, sat down and did, like, yoga, and they were like, oh, God, what do we do? There's poon. Oh, no. Like, I mean, I guess, you know, because she turned sideways and we could see that it was not like the 1990s racing strip. It was maybe more like the 1970s Years of the Big Butch. We could see that when she turned sideways. And I can understand that maybe if you never saw one before, like apparently the dudes on that front line, that you're like, what is that? Is it Cthulhu? I don't know. Like, is it going to multiply like tribbles in Star Trek? I don't understand what's happening. Like, if you are really unfamiliar with that body part, I can see how you might be confused. But this is what happens when you guys just let me talk, by the way.
and that was so amazing to me because, like, yeah, those guys ran. They, like, backed the fuck up, like, oh my God, the nude woman, what do we do? Because it tells you these are fucking incel fucking losers.
They're Klingons.
Yeah. Yeah.
That shot literally is probably going to be the Pulitzer Prize for feature photography.
So if you think, and
that
again,
would actually be amazing, to be perfectly honest.
I'll show you another difference between men and women. You know, you had, like, last century in Tiananmen Square, you had Tank Man, the guy who stood in front of the tanks, right? But
yeah,
women's like, what? And oh my God, the guys run away. He was more successful than Tank Man.
Some of the things that I find the most revealing and that amuse me the most often about society are attitudes towards nudity and sexuality and attitudes towards evil and superstition. Because what people are actually afraid of in the sense that they call it evil is super revealing about them. You'll hear people talk about how, like, they don't believe in God, or maybe they're agnostic or whatever, but then something comes along and they're like, that's evil, right? And you're like, well, what does that mean? And then suddenly you discover all the things about them, right? Like, oh, okay, I get it. So those are like,
I don't believe in God, and Dick Cheney is evil.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's the difference between a religious context of evil, and I think we're an atheist, or at least me as an atheist, like me, is that people that are religious, that believe in God, that believe that evil exists, believe evil is like a thing, like you know, it's almost like this orb of thing that, you know, there's, you know, that it's like a thing in and of itself. Whereas for me, evil is your actions and your attitude and your intentions, what you want to do and what you actually do can be evil. But I don't think like you can't be possessed by evil. It's not like, you know, walking down the street and fucking the green orb from the heavy metal movie Heavy Metal. The green orb comes and, you know, now it hits me and now I'm evil. It doesn't work like that.
Yes,
yeah,
but
not,
then
it's
you
not
look
a satanic thing.
But
Right.
then you look at people who take, for example, let's take, for example, like mothers. This is like so off topic. Good job. I completely hijacked the whole conversation. But like, you look at like articles of, say, a mother who drowned her 3 kids in the bathtub or drove them off into the lake or something, right? And they are able to say things like, I was possessed by evil. And that is a legitimate thing in people's minds. Like, what does that even mean? I was possessed by an evil spirit, an evil entity, an evil whatever, and it made me do this terrible action, right?
Like, make me do it. Yeah.
You know, so it's how people perceive when they are scared of something for superstitious reasons, like they don't want to take an action, say, to be vulgar, they don't want to pee on someone's grave, and they actually will be like, we should have laws against it, because what they are afraid of is that there will then be a negative, evil, metaphysical repercussion from taking. Now, I'm not saying that action isn't vulgar or whatever, but the basis for making a law shouldn't be, well, that's just an evil thing, right? Like, but people will do very strange things, or they'll avoid doing things because they're superstitious about it and they believe that it's attracting evil to them.
Step on a crack, break your mother's back, right?
Yeah, yes, stuff like that. And so people, just what people believe about it, I find fascinating.
Sister Danger, before you were a member of the Breakfast Club, back when we had the original crew and we first started with the round robins, one of the topics that we discussed was necrophilia. No victim, no crime.
Right.
I mean,
well,
go.
So, yeah, no.
By all means, please discuss. I'd love to hear what you have to say. You know?
I don't care, actually. If somebody wants to sleep with a dead person, I mean, is it weird and like not a thing on my list that I would ever do? And I probably wouldn't want to date you if you wanted to do that or had done that. But you know what? That it is less of a crime to sleep with a dead person than it is to sleep with a sheep. I mean, the sheep is still alive. It could be suffering and you don't know it. The dead person is just dead. Like, gross, not healthy. Yeah, maybe all of those things. Does it offend people's sensibilities? Sure. Is it actually hurting anybody? No. I mean,
say there's Quintka, for a while, he recently made this video trying to claim that I'm a pedophile because for a period of time I was in support of drag kids, and I also don't have a problem with nudity. How do you feel about drag kids? Yeah, he tried to call me a pedophile just because it was.
Well, so let me clarify terms just so I'm not maybe commenting without knowing what I'm talking about. But by drag kids, what you mean are somebody who is under the age of majority dressing up in drag and like being like a drag king or a drag queen, maybe doing drag kid shows at your school talent show or something. You're like, I'm going to be a drag kid, and you go out and drag and do a show. That's what we mean by drag kids. Is that correct? I've never heard
that. And there has been occurrences of being at an adult, like a gay club and performing there as well.
No,
but we're just talking about doing like a straight up drag show. We're not talking about a club where people are getting sexually revealing and nudity and like at a strip club, right? Like
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So, I mean, pedophilia, by definition, is not the same as like pederasty. The pedophilia actually means an attraction to children, not even that you've necessarily done things. Although I feel like one of them very strongly usually leads to the other. So I feel pretty comfortable, like kind of being like, well, I mean, in the colloquial sense of the term pedophile, what we mean is somebody who actually does abuse underage kids, even if the literal definition has that semantic, just as parlance, as common parlance. And so, I mean, no, I feel like that person doesn't know what those words mean because, well, one, you must believe that there is something intrinsically wrong, inherently wrong with nudity if you think that its sheer presence is somehow any kind of a pedophilic act. It isn't. And I just find that to be ridiculous and not even reflective of the real world. I mean, even in a household, I mean, hello, I mean, I'm sorry, but if you've lived with somebody your whole life, everybody probably seen everybody naked, even if you're all very clandestine people. Somebody probably walked by the bathroom door when it was cracked one day and maybe saw something. I mean, like, this is like that's what happens when you live in close quarters, right? Like, so you must inherently believe something's wrong with nudity in order to just be like, oh, well, naked kids means pedophilia. Like,
Well,
no.
and to your point, now,
And I think that person is more pedophilia than the person they're accusing. Like, what are you looking at that kid thinking about? Ah, creep.
in frontier days, people lived in like a one-room house.
I mean, how do you think mom and dad had 75,000 kids in the one-room house?
Well,
right? Like, yeah.
And they very often have one bed. And yeah, obviously, yeah, if they're having multiple kids, they're getting down, and the kids are right there. So it's beyond even just nudity; they're actually witnessing sex. And so now, in the case, obviously, that's not what's happening in the gay club for the there's no as long as it's not being sexualized. But yeah, curious, yeah, that doesn't happen. So you said no gay men masturbating to boy in drag, right? And that's not what Kazum was defending. So that's a straw man. So, but a typical view.
But that's typical curious, I guess.
And basically, as far I hadn't even really heard of gay kids, drag kids. But here's the other thing that gets me though. Where's what's this Quokka or whatever?
I'm sorry. What is even wrong with drag kids? What is wrong if a child wants to wear the clothes of another gender? I'm sorry. Oh, is there something that is like bad or embarrassing or somehow just like morally repugnant about females' clothing?
Nothing.
Or men's
I guess apparently it's about the how when there's the dancing, the type of dancing that is done is somewhat sexualized.
Well, do you suppose that maybe we should not have the Miss America contests anymore, or that we should remove all of the men from that audience, or men and women that might be attracted to other women, so lesbians or bi people? Should we remove all of them because those girls aren't always over, the age of majority? Is that pedophilia for anybody watching?
Where's Quinka on those little beauty pageants for young children where they tart the girls up like they were like they were models, very sexualized, and they have makeup on, and they do the same things that the Miss America pageant does.
Do you see this?
But they're like 6.
Do you see what this says?
No.
Little Miss America Junior State something 1984.
That's right.
I didn't know they gave participation trophies away in 1984.
Yeah. Well, see, but that's the whole thing. Where is Quinka on stuff like that? Because basically they do the exact same thing with some of the especially in the South, where they have these beauty contests where they're like 6 years old. And they're doing all the same things that the 21-year-olds do. Is Quinka against that? I mean, he should be, right? I would think.
I mean, that's what I'm saying is that, well, first of all, I'm not saying that I think I was engaged in anything that was remotely like pedophilia, right? But that's what I'm saying is that if you're gonna call this pedophilia, then certainly me being in a Little Miss America pageant and every other little girl since whenever, that's all pedophilia as well. It's like.
And dancing in general, just dancing in general has a sexual component to it.
When somebody says to me though, like that little girl shouldn't wear that sleeveless dress or the tank top because her shoulders are showing to school, I do not question if that little girl is somehow being provocative. I question where the hell your head is that thought went through your mind to begin with. Why are you looking at a little kid? And I mean, for real, that is where it's at. It's like it's in the person that is saying it out loud. They're telling you, I had this thought and I'm afraid everyone else has had it too. That's what they're saying. So when he's like, oh, you're a pedophile, well, he's the one who thought about that first. He's the one who had those pedophile thoughts first. And
I get what you're saying.
That's scary. So now he's going to project it. Bullshit.
Yeah, I want to jump in, but first I want to let Rob finish what he was going to say.
I'm done.
Oh, right. Okay. I just want to reiterate a story. I told this story in a YouTube video years ago. But
that was Amy saying it, not Rob.
Once upon a time, when I had my body piercing studio, I had some customers come in who were clearly tourists from another part of the UK.
Sorry, I just comment. Anyway, go on.
That's all right. Anyway, I had these customers come in who were clearly tourists from someplace further north in the UK.
Yeah.
And it was a young couple with 3 young children, 2 of whom were probably under school age. And the middle child, who might have been maybe 3 or 4 tops, was a girl, and she had a little pink shirt with a decal on it that said "porn star in training." Now, I want to ask you a question. What's more disturbing, the fact that that T-shirt was mass-produced for a 3-year-old, or the fact that a parent would walk around with that on their child?
The latter. The latter.
I'm hoping it was one of those home print jobs where it was like an iron-on.
I don't know if that.
I can't imagine seeing it in a store, that's for sure. But on the other hand, I did see it, so it came from somewhere. I mean, and if you did print that for your own kid's shirt, that's even worse, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I do agree with that. I think actually it's worse.
It speaks to a whole culture. It speaks to a whole culture of sexualization being funny or cute somehow for kids. There is a mentality amongst a certain people who seem to think that it's kind of funny or something. I'm not sure because I don't understand it because I don't look at kids like that. But
like,
I mean,
I'm 100%.
I see it out there sometimes because if that T-shirt was mass produced, that's fucking horrifying.
Oh yeah. Rob never got to say what he was going to say.
It's all right. I can actually jump in with this though. In our culture, we sexualize. Not all of us, but we have a tendency to sexualize children all the time. Like you see a little boy and a little girl playing together, and it's immediately, oh, look at the cute couple. Oh, look at them, they're so sweet together. Oh, look, you have a little boyfriend and you have a little girlfriend. 2 little boys are playing together, and God forbid they touch hands. It's holy shit. We got to keep these kids away from each other because who knows what they might end up doing. That's pretty fucked up way of.
And to that, I remember when I was a kid. It was me and one of my cousins and I think one other boy and like 3 girls, and we're sitting around and talking, and then like, you know, like the one girl, she was young, and like, you know, she started exposing herself, and then they're talking, and then like I remember an adult showed up and was like freaking the fuck out, and of course we're like 6, we don't know what the fuck's going on, we don't know which end is up, you know, there's that curiosity that kids have, nothing sexual about it, we didn't even have a clue what sex was yet, but they freaked the fuck out, and you know, everyone got in trouble, and it was like, what, we didn't know that there was anything to be ashamed of because we weren't thinking the things they were thinking we were thinking.
So and this is actually kind of fascinating to me. So I mean, I guess I should just say, like, to qualify all the stuff, but I mean, I'm a super sex positive person, so I don't really have the qualms about that. Of course, I'm also a very consent based and positive person as well, and I think that these are critically important to learn. But when we talk about the sexualizing of kids, of women, of anything, we actually live in something of a dualistic society at this time. There are only, I mean, not only, but the majority of our society only looks at sex and men and women or relationships in one of 2 ways, right? And it's hard to, when all of your life sex has been equated, or anything that is even remotely, like even the touching of hands, right, on a playground or whatever, when all of these things have only ever been taught to you or equated to you as being the precursors or the preludes of the romantic venture to getting your partner, right? That's the only purpose for these things. Then it is very difficult to pull apart, in your intellectually speaking, that those things can occur without that being the reason that they're occurring, right? And I speak much less, like kids are a much different kind of field. So I'm largely speaking with regards to adults right now, because I certainly would never ever be like, hey, you know, sex with kids. Like, no, bad. like, so, but
well, that's a relief.
Adults, like, God, I would hope you guys like know that about me by now. But but at least with regards to adults, even if you just ask, like, the number of people who feel that the act of sex is equivalent to love of a person, right? Still today, it's very prevalent, and because this is what we're taught, this is what religion. We're hugely Christian, you know, country, and that's what Christianity teaches: is that sex is the thing that you do with the person that you love, that is your spouse that you're going to marry, right?
That is your spouse being an operative part of that whole function, and therefore, if they're not your spouse, it's somehow evil. And this is why I object to the whole thing in general, and why it's so toxic, is because the idea that there's a moral component to the act of sex is repugnant to me.
It's invented.
The way you go about having sex can be immoral. Like if you have to lie to someone, for example, or if you jump someone, for example, obviously, that kind of thing. But if sex is consensual and based on desire and affection, I don't see any reason why, other than problems, for example, if everybody's consenting age and all that kind of thing, I'm pretty loose with it, obviously.
But if the only thing you've ever been taught,
what I object to mostly is that there's this moral dimension to the act of sex, that somehow having sex outside of a bond of marriage is itself bad, immoral, and dirty, right?
But this is my point, though.
That gets used against a lot of people.
If that's the only thing you've ever been taught, if that's how you perceive, that's it, your lens of looking at the world, then with children that carries over, right? What that means is that when you look at children doing things that you already have a predefinition as being adult things, like, say, you know, wearing a tank top with no sleeves or whatever it is, right? If you already have that idea that this is what a wife would do for her husband because you've sexualized that idea, then if some other person's kid comes to school with the thing, like, you are transferring it onto them, right? And we still live in a culture and a society that largely looks at anything having to do with sex as or even just like the male-female dynamic as being sexual, and as then being all of these other things. There's a bunch of baggage that goes into that, right?
And that's one of the reasons why there's so many people have such distaste toward prostitution, because the idea that, oh, well, you're having sex, not only is there no marriage, there's also not necessarily an emotional component to it. You're just, it's just a physical act. And that they look at prostitutes and they'll say all sorts of heinous things that, well, how could you do that because you don't love the other person? I'm like, yeah, but so what? That doesn't have to be part of the act. As long as all the participants are of age and have the capability to consent and actually consent, and they're all happy, then what the fuck does it have to do with anybody else?
I mean, but that's what religion teaches, though, is that those are the same.
Whether there's an exchange of money or not, then no one should care. But that's funny, because the people who tend to be right wingers, who are perfectly fine with getting the government out of business, unless that business is a woman who wants to basically exploit her own sex to make a living, then all of a sudden that's terrible and it's evil.
Can't do that. Yeah. Oh, fuck. No. Well, we don't want women charging for that.
Well, and that's the I forget what it's called, but there's a certain dynamic where basically and it's particularly of religious men, but not just religious men, but especially religious men. The idea that on the one hand, a lot of men will want a woman who is sexual, who will do all the things, all the dirty, ridiculous, horrible fantasies he had in his head, but yet is virginal and clean and pristine. And again, even the idea that somehow not having sex makes you clean. I mean,
I'm just saying that those things are mutually exclusive. That
Right.
chick doesn't exist
Oh, I know.
without experience.
Exactly. Because that's the thing I think kind of funny because again they kind of want it both ways, but it does. You said it doesn't exist, and it's like
You don't get what's her face out of Firefly / Serenity. What was she, the companion? You don't get a companion without having that companion having experience.
Exactly.
Like, what imaginary world do you live in?
And quite frankly, having been with people who are inexperienced and people with experience, I'll take experience 10 times out of 10.
True.
I'm going to go with probably that, but back to that thing that I said a long time ago, which was I'm less interested in your experience and more interested in your ability to learn.
That's pretty funny. Listen, guys, we're at 3:37 at the moment, and we only get four hours. And I want to wrap it up because every minute that we save is added on to next week. So,
nice.
Oh, really?
Cool.
So yeah. You only get on the free one. You only get 20 hours a month. Sometimes we get.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So and sometimes we get 5 shows in a month. So I want to try to keep all the shows below 4 hours. So listen, Sue, you haven't said much for ages. Is there anything you wanted to talk about before we shove off?
It's kind of hard to say things when you get a lot of dominant personalities. That's what I'll be my final thought.
Well, there's no problem with that. I mean, it's absolutely fine. Whatever. What about you, Michael? Is there anything that you've been chomping on the bit to say?
I've been trying to get our way all the way back to DoorDash, and all I can do, I almost got there. I made it to Rainbow Dash. Hear me out.
Oh no!
Joe, I apologize because I was blaming you for the fact that other people didn't show up because maybe last week got a little dicey. But what I realized is maybe those of us who are exhibitionists are out fighting for justice against all of those unmarked federal agents, and they're just doing yoga.
Is it yoga with clothing or no clothing?
Well, I will do everyone.
It's hot to
I will do
yoga.
everyone a favor and keep my clothes on. Because I don't think anybody wants to see this.
Oh man. Well, that might actually be a selling point in a protest. I'm just saying.
Well, speaking of protests, I mean, I might have to get myself involved with some local protests pretty soon because it's kind of hard watching what's going on, and I don't want what's on the Pacific Northwest to come here. And that's an understatement. But obviously, COVID, so we got to be careful and stuff.
Wear the mask.
In my past life, when I lived in the UK, I would have been more than happy to put myself in harm's way in terms of getting arrested or not getting arrested. But I'm not so keen to get arrested in America. Call me chicken. But I'm not so keen to really do that. However, I'm more than happy to offer my services as a witness with a camera and see as much as I can and document as much as I can and talk to people on as many different angles as possible and see what I can learn.
Call me chicken. That's DoorDash.
Right.
I wish I had been for DoorDash. I don't know what happened.
Oh, yeah. I kind of got in a verbal altercation while driving DoorDash the other day with some 20-something walking his bike.
All right. So listen, I'm going to jump off now and let Rob on and let him have a say. And then somehow I'm going to leave it to the 6 of you to wind up without me. It's a heavy duty responsibility, but I totally know you guys can do it. All right. All right. See, and everybody who's been in the comments and been engaging, I want to thank everybody for watching and all that. And I'll see you guys all next week on the Breakfast Club. Here comes Rob.
Oh man, are we literally still live? He just left us live and he was like, Tabata, I'm out. Is that what just happened?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for putting up with some of my negativity and the pessimism and such, and I appreciate you being pretty calm about all of it. So
I'm not out. I'm just letting you guys finish. That's all.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not going anywhere. I'll still be here after the chat. So don't. I mean, yeah. Come on. What the fuck?
I I didn't actually feel like anybody was. I didn't feel like anybody was particularly negative. At least not on the show. There might have been some negative commentary from, you know.
Well, I just feel a lot of my questions were very negative and sometimes a bit provocative, and I just appreciate the calm responses. So
we love you, man.
Like, what are you doing over there, Agent? Are you raising your hand? Are you like, I've gone into Krynos and now I'm, you know.
His boobs.
Oh.
These are mine.
I maybe you were provocative. I will give you that. I did not actually feel like you.
Yeah, I don't think actually it was spicy tonight. I will say it was spicy tonight. Sometimes a little spiciness is not bad.
Now that's a spicy meatball.
Well, yeah, we can get some time from DoorDash.
I don't know about spicy meatballs. So. I'm just saying. Oh man,
Oh,
this whole conversation.
Oh, boy.
And you guys, thanks for bringing it full circle for me, guys. I knew I could count on you.
Oh wait, Karis is here tonight, so here you go, Karis.
This was a good group.
I want to see you like in a man corset because I bet you'd look super hot.
Ooh.
In a man corset?
Well, you know, corsets were actually like all makeup and beautiful clothes and high heels originally invented for men, not women.
But why a man corset?
Because they're actually sewn differently than female corsets, because the male body is more triangular, whereas the female body tends to be more hourglass, and so man corsets are made to fit the male body.
Okay.
That's why.
Mark this down as a campaign donation.
Hey, well, don't you guys remember on Bugs Bunny, Elmer wore it. They call him a truss, but it's a corset.
I mean, you're all over there like Bugs Bunny, and I'm over here like Pinhead and Hellraiser, right? Like, I feel like we're like on way different pages with man corset.
Well, that was my first experience with ever seeing it. It was Elmer Fudd, like his clothes split open and he had a truss on, and I was like, I actually asked my grandmother, like, what the hell is that? You know, like, and they're, oh, that's a truss. It's to make you look thinner.
The very simple answer for that is, yeah.
Why not, Curious? Why not?
So, and by the way, I just want to say again, like, super congratulations, actually, on your political aspirations right now. So, it's actually exciting. It's really exciting to hear about that, and I'm glad to hear about your success. I know that the last time I was here, you had mentioned that you were either beginning this process or thinking about beginning the process. I'm sort of curious now. I'd like to see what your campaign stuff is, just to, if for no other reason than to familiarize myself with somebody that I have, you know, sat here and had all kinds of conversation with, right? Like, just to get to see.
Yeah, this shit isn't real to me until I can like and donate.
Yeah. I mean, until it affects your capitalist pocketbook.
I now have a treasurer for the campaign. I actually haven't met her yet, though. But I do have a treasurer for the campaign. She was a treasurer for other campaigns, so I'm really comfortable with her. But she and I actually have to go and open up an account for the campaign. So
redundancy is a thing.
Yeah. I mean, because I don't think I can do it alone. Because I'm not really dealing with the money. The treasurer is. So I believe that she has to be there.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to find information when you've never done this before. It's not easy to figure out.
Look at if you go to the Federal Election Committee website, fec.gov, you'll find quite a lot of information. There's a lot of rules you got to follow. So be careful, because you can get yourself in big trouble if you screw up.
Just ask all the questions. Take the information from everywhere that you can. It does not matter where the knowledge came from. If you want to do the thing, you will take it from every place that it comes from. You will weed out what is the best. You will go forward, and you will stick to it. You know, if that is the thing that you want to do, stick with it. And maybe you won't be successful this time, but next time you will be miles ahead of where you started this time. I believe in you.
I'm curious.
And on that note, I'm going to end the broadcast.
I was
with you guys to party for a few minutes. I want to thank everybody in the comments and so forth. But yeah, we're getting close to time, and I really need to jump. So yeah, thanks everybody for watching, and may all your ups and downs be ups. And thanks everybody for participating in tonight's broadcast. Peace and joy.